Hello, and welcome to the Simply WoW podcast, where we discuss WoW. Simply. As always, I'm Meeps, the guy that doesn't do Mythic Plus, and joining me today are two idiots I found loitering around. Rise.
Hi there, how's it going?
And Jay.
Say hi. Sorry, I read the script.
See what I mean? Today, we will be discussing raids and BfA. And all three of us have had some experience with the mythic raids in BfA. However, Rise is the one that's had the most experience. So he'll be talking especially the middle two tiers because Jay was indisposed and I was dead. So
we're not going to talk about Crucible. Anywho.
Right. No one talks about Crucible.
No one does.
What's Crucible?
Yeah, exactly.
So
we'll get there soon.
So we'll just start at the very beginning with Uldir, and we actually we thought we were ready for Uldir. Like, we came in to BfA on fire. Some of us, anyway. I know Rise and I and a few others would clear the entire board of world quests twice a day, actually. And we were pretty much as well geared as we could be going into the first tier.
So I remember specifically that me, Otter, Ben, and Zachary, we set alarm clocks on our phone ticking every 12 hours for when the world quests reset. So we'd wake up at like 3 in the morning, and our alarm would go off, and it's like, I gotta log on WoW and do those world quests, I don't have to worry about them later. That way we can just pump dungeons all day. And that was our schedule. We were... Oh god, it was too much. Never again.
That's crazy. You did all that work, and meanwhile, I just get home from work, log in, do the gear world quest, and then moved on with my life.
Well, you see, that's because I did 3 characters. 2 shamans because I'm an idiot, and a balance druid.
I remember
I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
Because
it's a lot of work. I was an idiot. I thought the loot was going to work a lot differently, and I guess that's something that we'll kind of tip on when we
Here
get
I am,
to
like, Rested Druid. I just need eye level, and stats don't matter. Yay!
Right.
And now I'm playing a class with the exact same stat priority in Shadowlands.
And
yeah.
Oh, right. We had one of our tanks decide to just dip on us early on, so I was actually boomkin
in the
at
first week.
Yeah, I was boomkin, then had to like power my monk to be the brewmaster.
Yeah, you did. It was really rough.
Thank you for your sacrifice.
So, one thing I want to ask before we get into it, because I guess we were already kind of talking about it, as far as how was the content pre-raid? Because when expansion comes out, usually they give you a buffer time to figure things out, get acclimated with the game, and get stuff done. So what was the pre-raid experience for you guys like? Do you guys remember it being good? Was it bad? Were there certain things that you were doing? Because I remember what I was doing.
I was exhausted. I remember that because of all the world quests and, trying to just pump your reputation so you could get the items off the vendor because they were good at that point. They were, 340?
Yeah.
Which was almost raid gear, or it's like LFR equivalent.
The other thing that I remember doing is when I had downtime during the day after I had, woken up and done all my world quests on all 3 characters and running all my dungeons for the week, I remember that I was going way out of my way to do a bunch of herb farming because we had someone in the guild that was willing to, if I gave them herbs, he would give me a Dark Moon deck. And so I went way the fuck out of my way for, I think it was like 6 days straight, just BoE farming, finding herbs, looking at guides for routes, and just getting all the herbs I could. I gave it to him, and then like a day later, he's like, dude, I got your Darkmoon deck. And he walks up and he gives me I can't remember what it was, but it was the Caster Darkmoon deck, and that thing was busted. And I could have sold it for like 800k, but I just used it for raid instead, which maybe I shouldn't have, but...
You see, I never got that deal.
He
never told me that until after the fact.
Speaking of him, I still on my priest have like 30,000 of the blue shit. Yeah, 30. He's just one day I get on my priest and I see just loads of mail from him. Just, here you go, take these to level your priest. I was like, I don't need that many. He's like, I don't care. They're just filling up my bank.
Yep.
Yeah, the pre-raid experience, really hectic. Lots to do.
I honestly, I wasn't that exhausted. I'll be honest with you. For me, it was like, I'd get home from work and then just like I said, I do the world quests that I needed gear from, and Azeroth. I don't care about pets, so I basically got to ignore like 8 world quests every day. And my Mythic Plus group, or I guess Mythic Gearing group or whatever, was like pretty consistent. So we would just play like on the weekends. So I just weekdays I'd log on, do world quests, and then honestly chill. I got to play a lot of games during the gear up process because I got lucky with gear and did everything that I could.
I remember that
And then
first
I
week
logged off.
of Mythic Dungeons was challenging.
Oh yeah, it was
Both
hard.
of our groups. I think like week 1, Rise's group was. I mean, okay, so for the people that don't know, Meeps and I were in one group, and then Rise was in another group, and Rise was healing for that group, and I was healing for my group, and our tank bailed, so Meeps was like, "Fuck, I guess I'll tank," and I'm like, "All right, whatever." So I'm healing Meeps. Rise is healing our other tank, and at some point, I remember Rise like asking me or asking you, Meeps, to like, can we just switch groups next week? and even though like you and I'll argue a lot, like fuck, it happened this week. There's certain things where we'll just misunderstand each other and it just refuse to just see eye to eye, and it'll be like, meow, and then like we both
Boom,
won't
boom,
back
boom,
down.
kiss, kiss.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it gets a little bit stressful sometimes, and even though we had that, I still remember like hopping in Discord and Rise being like, "Hey, you guys want to switch it up next week?" And I was just sitting there, I'm like, "No."
Yeah, as a wrestler shaman at the time, it was really fucking stressful for me to heal Ben, who was a damage-oriented prot paladin. He is a great prot paladin, to be fair, but man, those first couple weeks, like him running more damage to try to push us through bosses, and it's like I could not keep up. I did not have the throughput. I did not have the Azerite gear for it. Like it was a rough time.
Well, you
But-
also had the worst healer with the worst no gear tank.
Yeah. True.
Like I kind of expected that to happen. Whereas
Yeah,
our
you're not
group,
wrong.
we literally had the best no gear tank and
Right.
The best healer.
the best
Yeah.
healer class. Maybe not, player, because I'm not that great. But like I'm playing a Resto Druid, which is just great in Mythic Plus, and he was playing a Brewmaster, which is like, I took damage.
I had to spin around in circles and clear my stagger.
Yeah. So as far as the
I'm like, no.
as far as the pre-raid experience that you guys had, though, do you guys say it was good? Is there anything that you would not want to see again? Was it bad?
Grinding
I honestly thought it was really good until we stepped into the raid, and then things kind of took a turn. But we'll get there.
I hope that there's.
go ahead.
I hope there's less incentive to grind, like less incentive to just go out and clear the board for world quests, because AP was a huge incentive at the time. It was much more important early on than it was later in the expansion, and then of course, like I said, reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, the only thing I hated was grinding rep. I'm okay with doing world quests for gear, doing world quests for, whatever power we're chasing. It doesn't look like we're going to have to do that in Shadowlands, thankfully. But the reputation grind is just something that I'm just like, no. So I'm glad that that's not going to be a thing too. So I'm going to be happy with Shadowlands comparatively to BfA.
Hopefully.
And then there was Uldir.
Yep. How about down to brass tacks? What we're here for.
Yep.
Well, let's start it right at the beginning. Talak. What'd you
I thought
guys...
Taluk was a very interestingly designed fight. Again, I hadn't played a ton of WoW before this, but I think walking into Uldir and having Taluk as a fight was like, oh shit, they're doing a bunch of cool new stuff. Like, this seems very, very interesting to me. That was the first vibe I got, although the fight was like kind of a pushover.
Right, and that's something that it's very typical for the first fight to be a pushover. Like, it's usual that you can kill the first boss on Mythic while still struggling to get the last boss on Heroic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to say about Talak is how surprised I was that it wasn't bugged to hell. Being an elevator boss, like I my feelings on Blizzard and their ability to squash bugs isn't isn't a good light. So the fact that we had this platform that we all stood on for the entire fight, and no one you couldn't just stand somewhere and glitch out of existence. That was surprising, and the fact that the elevator went down, there was no issue with that. The whole fight was bug free. That was really surprising, and a really interesting fight because of that.
I think one of the things that's interesting to notice is there were ways to, in a way, kind of break the fight. I remember the very first time they walked in there and I realized that the elevator was descending and I looked off the edge, I was like, I wonder if I can make that. And I used one of those potions that turns you into the fell meteor and you fall to the ground and you don't take fall damage. And I just was at the bottom and I was looking up well, this is kind of awkward. And just I had to wait. I think we wiped on that exact pull because that was our very first pull. But I was sitting down there okay, well, what do I do now? I just don't have to do anything? It's the first week, that was interesting to see that you could kind of cheese it. But we found out later that if everyone tries to do it, the boss disengages. It has a weird, almost snap thing, okay. And then it just restarts the fight and everyone teleports back to the top.
Okay, I wonder what would have happened if everybody did that except for one tank.
Yeah, I did think about that too.
I'm gonna piggyback on Meeps here. I was very surprised that it wasn't buggy. I didn't really like the fight. I found it really boring. The only part of it that I actually really liked was the lasers as the elevator is going down, God. And you had to have people look down and be like, oh, the laser's coming, we got to move up, and put markers down and the whole group moves. I love that aspect because I hate mechanics that just kill you and you can't see it coming. I'm okay with mechanics like on Zanesh, we'll get to it, but I'm okay with mechanics like that, or the Talic laser beam as you're descending on the elevator, but I absolutely hate when you just can't see it coming and it's just meh. But if you can see it coming and people just don't move, that's an entirely different thing. So for that aspect, I love the elevator part. The rest of it, fucking snore. But it's the first boss, so right. You kind of expect that, right? At least to a degree.
With the laser beams, that's one thing I wanted to I forgot to mention is this is mostly we'll be talking about Mythic because we do have a Mythic focus whenever we raid. So whenever we talk about mechanics, it'll be about the Mythic version of the fight.
Yeah. But yeah, like Meep said, I was extremely shocked that the first pull we didn't walk, and then the elevator's okay, it's going to start going down, and half the raid plummets to their death, because that wouldn't surprise me if that was actually a bug. I'm sure it probably was, and they fixed it early on, but the fact that everything was working was just shocking.
A pleasant surprise.
Yeah. I expected to have deaths to it, but nope, didn't. So it was good.
Well, there isn't much else to say about Talic being the first boss and the simplest of all. So how about we move on to number 2? Mother.
I thought Mother was too quick. I think the first pull that we did was
excuse you.
Okay, we spent 5 minutes and we figured it out and then we did it. And I'm pretty sure a week in, we killed it in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I was oh, okay. We can just pull her to the last room and Lust and Burn her. That's... Alright, that sucks a lot of the fun part out of that fight.
Yeah.
So kind of disappointing in that regard. It felt like it was too... It felt like it was we were exploiting it almost. And I know it was the general strategy, but
I take a different stance. I actually really like the aspect that you can do it as slowly or as quickly as you want. If you want to take it slower and not have that damage crunch at the last little bit, you can. Or you can choose to, shove people through as fast as possible, get to the last bit, lust and kill her, and just have a damage crunch where you're literally going to wipe if you don't kill her in 5 seconds. I love that aspect. It's very much like choose your own adventure novels or whatever, which in concept is fucking phenomenal. As novels, they're absolutely terrible because you can't write that many different variations and have it all make sense. But in theory, it, was really cool. And I liked Mother because I felt like it was the closest thing that we'll get to a boss like that, where in theory it plays out like this, and when you actually fight it, it actually plays out like.
Two things. One, that's why I got them in at RPGs, Jay. Those are choose your own adventure novels. And two, I kind of agree, but for a different reason with why you like the fight. I liked it because typically before, in recent years it's changed, but earlier on, say Wrath and Cataclysm, the longer you were in a tier, the faster the bosses became, and the less you had to worry about mechanics. It's true to some degree, but especially in older tiers, I appreciated because I always would farm the bosses to death. So like our 30th or 40th kill in, I want that boss fight to be about a quarter as long as it was the first time, which was true. Like Mother is a perfect example of that. Like your first time in there, you may need to spend some time with her in the first two rooms before you're able to have the gear to just drag her into the third room, lest him burn. But you know, I guess we did gear up pretty quickly, so being able to quickly do that, it was kind of a cheat, but at the same time, just glad that it was something we could do.
Yeah, I think it probably can't be understated how nice that is for guilds that, like, you have to do your re-clears and get gear or whatever, but it always feels a little bit more tedious when you've got a fight that is like guaranteed 10 minutes long. Yeah, or sure, Zenesh, although I have a different hot take than you guys do, I'm sure, but we'll get to it. But when you've got a fight where you're like, okay, this fight's going to take us 10 minutes.
Hellfire Assault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But whereas if you do have, theoretically, if the whole raid instance was set up so that, like, literally you can push faster and faster if you'd like to, then that would have been the ideal thing. Obviously, that's not what happened, but at least for Mother, I felt like that was a very good step forward. Maybe something that they'll try to do more in the future.
All right, so
Fair enough.
we've talked the first two. Now it breaks into, what were there, 3 different ones? Yeah, 3. Vectis, Zekvaz, and Fetid Devourer. Do we tackle these in order of the dungeon journal or how they were actually defeated live?
I think let's go how they were defeated
certain
live.
Certain guilds did them in different orders, though. So,
well,
how about you just pick one at random and we'll just do that?
Fetid Devourer was last.
I was going to
Absolutely.
say, no matter what, we talk about Fetid last, because
Right.
Fetid was a problem child.
Sure.
All right, then let's do Vectis before we do our guild killer.
So, for people that may not remember, Vectis is the blood guy in the back with all the little ad spawns and the blood contagion that he puts on everyone. Just so it's, there. Vectis was a really, really fun AoE fight. I'm thinking of, as far as, like, the AoE aspect, Zekvaz was a lot more AoE, but, like, Vectis in the positioning and, like, mechanically, like, where you were supposed to be and, like, how you controlled the ads was really interesting. Not as much from a DPS perspective, but much more strenuous on, like, your healers and your tanks to make sure that everything was under control, everyone was in the right positions, and then a little bit of personal responsibility. I thought Vectis was, like, a pretty average fight. There was nothing, like, super special. Like, when I think of Vectis, I don't remember anything, like, super significantly special. Especially on Mythic, it was just kind of, like, same thing as Heroic, and just, like, watch your positioning more, kill the ads more. It's like, okay.
Yeah, the whole blood contagion thing was kind of cool and interesting, and then you actually do it, and you're just like, this sucks.
Yeah. I do want to say, though,
there
visually,
was the aspect of, like,
really cool.
he'd randomly just kill people when he does that burrow and charge thing, because there was no way to get out in time unless you're a demon hunter or, like, a druid with
Mage, Blink.
Just don't be up his ass. Like,
still, like, if you were super far, like, okay, if you just couldn't get away from him very quickly because you had to stay there to soak one of the blood pools and you got chosen, like, you were gonna get fucked. It was one of those things where it's like, RNG could severely fuck you, and I was like,
Yeah. I do have to say, though, as far as the aesthetics and, like, how the spells looked and all the animations are actually really good.
Yeah.
I thought it was one of the, like, theatrically, it was probably one of the better fights in that raid.
I think they could have changed the colors on the pools a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not colorblind or anything. I don't know what the colorblind mode looks like on that at all, or what it looks like for other people. But like the red and the purple, they kind of looked similar a little bit. So it's like, oh, is this the right one? Am I thinking of? Like, it's easy to get them confused. Give me like hot pink and like lime green.
I know that was one that frustrated me whenever, like, the first 20 or so polls, it's understandable. People are still adjusting to the diseases and how you deal with them. But then after that, it got just frustrating. Whenever people still don't get, like, oh, you gotta trade off with this person. You can't be trading off with the same person over and over again because it stacks. It's like, just let me strangle you.
Yeah. Yeah, overall, I
Stop
think
running
Vectus
away from me. I'm trying to give you a disease.
Right.
Vectus was like a pretty average fight. Like, I think they could have done more with it. It could have been more fun, but it was just your average fight. Nothing too bad.
Yeah.
Well, and let's move on to the Psy Killer. Old
Psy.
I love
Zekvoz.
Zekvoz. I love it.
3.0 killer.
It is my favorite boss fight from Uldir. I loved that whole aspect. I'm not even being sarcastic. I know you guys are probably thinking like sarcasm. Like no, I actually legit loved it. The aspect of like that dance that you had to do when like you had to go in or middle or out or whatever, like in the middle of all the mechanics, and then you got the ads running around, and it's like very chaotic. I love it. I love chaos.
It was a really fun fight, and plus it was like out of the first 3 fights where it was like you could have done Vectus first. Vectus wasn't super hectic AoE. Talik and Mother were basically single target, but when you got to Zekvoz, it was like, oh man, I get to bust out the AoE kit and change talents and really blow things up. Like, that fight was really, really fun. The only thing that sucked about it is that it was one of those fights where, kind of similar to some of the fights in Legion, one person could wipe the whole raid. Standing 2 yards too close would kill people. And that really, really, really sucked. Just that one ability. But man, that fight was really fun. I will agree.
I think the major problem that we had was people panicking is what really just did us in time and time again. Like, it was pretty clear what you had to do, but there were things that would make people panic, like whenever you would have to be in a certain part of the room to avoid getting the massive AoE damage, but also you got the thing that you had to run out. So people just panic, like, I don't know if I need to run out or if I need to stay in, and it would just get people killed.
And then there was one overlap where if you were taking too long in the fight, it was like, okay, you have to be in the ring, and people have to drop their orbs, and lightning's about to come out in 3 seconds. So the second that the ground effect diminishes, you have to spread, otherwise you'll get shot by lightning. And it's just like, man,
and then when you say spread, everybody goes in the same direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also what made the fight really fun, is like that chaos of like figuring out what you're gonna do and like adapting on the fly sometimes, because sometimes someone will be running past you and you have to shuffle over because there's a chance that you get hit by lightning, but they have to drop an orb, and now you have to change your positioning overall. You have to follow the bosses. You have to be interrupting, stunning all of the little ads, blowing them up while maintaining damage on the boss. Like, it was a pretty hectic but overall fun fight.
I agree.
Which I tend to like, personally.
Yeah.
But they can also kill guilds.
Also, I want to point out that something that's kind of interesting is, like, as far as, like, the damage numbers that were being considered, like, I think, like, the really, really top-end people on some fights were just barely pushing, like, 20,000 damage, like, if you were, like, kind of padding or if you were really, really geared. And on Zekvoz, it was the first fight with so many AoE mobs that you were like, oh man, I'm getting back to some good numbers. I pull 30k, 35k, and you're like, wow, like, suddenly that feels really, really good. So it was also a fight that just, like, you get in and it's like, oh man, I feel really underpowered coming from Legion doing 2 million damage, and suddenly, okay, well, at least I'm doing something now. It's better than doing 5,000 damage on a world quest or whatever.
Right.
So that was also that was a refreshing aspect to remind you that you were, like, really powerful to some degree.
I take it you
Yeah,
never...
I don't know what you're talking about. I was playing Resto at the time, so...
I take it you never did the strat on Mother where you just send everyone at once and nuke down
all
all
no,
the spawns?
Dude, we did that. That
Yeah,
was
that's
like a
what I thought.
50k thing, but that, again, I kind of consider that cheese, so... take it with a grain of salt. But
There was something that you guys mentioned a couple of times so far, and I think I want to clarify slightly. So while this may have been like our guild killer or whatever, I'm just gonna say it was the final nail in the coffin for us. I think I don't want to give this boss the credit of killing us because we made some bad decisions. I chose not to go boomkin, and because of that, 3 people left. So, I mean, we also had our roster at the time of exactly 20 people. Unfortunately, 3 of which we would have preferred to not have in the raid at the time. And then the rest are even like, oh, gee, I don't know. So we weren't exactly going in with the best of rosters to do that fight.
Or like we mentioned, a tank that dipped last second.
Yeah,
that was rough.
So literally, like scrambling to try and pull shit together, plus some mistakes.
Now on to an actual guild killer,
right?
In Fetid Devour, because this thing actually did kill quite a few guilds, which is astonishing because it's not even the end boss of a raid tier. Like, I guess people had a perception that the expansion wasn't that great or wasn't going to be good because of systems, and so I guess that's also a factor why people quit. But I remember there was a really famous guild, like Serenity or something, that like they disbanded on Fetid Devour, and everyone's like, "Oh shit!" Like, it was a really big deal at the time how overtuned that boss was.
I think it's a aspect of the patchwork boss, and I don't mean that in the sense of like the patchwork boss everybody thinks of, basically a target dummy that swings back. In this context, I mean the patchwork bosses, and if you think about Naxxramas patchwork, that boss literally killed guilds too. And then you look at Warlords of Draenor, the Butcher boss killed guilds. Because people get to a boss and they're like, oh, it's a patchwork boss with that other context in mind, and they're expecting that they're just going to stomp through it. And then they don't. And that's when people start getting a little bit like, this boss should have already been dead. I don't know how we haven't killed it yet. This is insane. We've wiped 120 times on, essentially a patchwork fight. And, you start getting all that drama in the guild. And I think it wouldn't have been nearly as bad if people would have just, not had that connotation of patchwork in their head, but the other one where it kills guilds because people underestimate it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
How many times would you say it got nerfed before they finally stopped nerfing it for progression?
I remember because I was
still counting.
I was with Resistance at the time. It got its 3rd nerf when we were able to walk in there and kill it in 4 pulls. And that pull was stressful.
Yeah.
Like a part of the fight, the really hard part that needed to get nerfed more, there were these big cysts, and they were a damage check. So it was like the boss was like, okay, whatever, we can kill this boss, not a huge deal. But when it spawned these pustules, you had to split the group to kill multiple at a time. And if Fetid ran over and ate one, it was just a wipe. He would basically get a berserk, and it was just over. And the health pool, like we literally had to assign like, okay, first one, we're doing all big cooldowns. Second one, we have no big cooldowns, but we have Lust. And then the third one was any remaining cooldowns you have plus potions, and you're just barely able to scrape by. And like it's just so stressful to do a fight like that. But all the rest of the mechanics, like the spread, the how to deal with the pustules and the ads, I thought it was really fun. The room also looked amazing. That like kind of contagion and like the weird like I don't know the white plague almost looks like spider webs everywhere. It looked really cool. And although I think the boss was literally copy-pasted from Trial of Valor, but...
Trial of Valor.
I can take it or leave it, the boss itself. I think the room itself was more interesting to me, and Rise mentioned it, the fact that he'll run over and eat the things, so you've got to kill them before he gets to them, was the really cool aspect for me. Everything else about the fight, I'm like, I can take it or leave it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Beast Lord in WoW, in a sense, a little bit, where the room kind of plays no purpose except for one specific mechanic, which is a cool mechanic, but that's the only thing to it.
Choo choo.
Well, I was thinking Beast
I
Blade
know,
Dormac.
but just
yeah.
talking about rooms and mechanics.
Oh, absolutely. But the other aspect, so I kind of, do I want a hot take? No, I'm gonna save my hot takes for later. I could take or leave the fight. Like I'm gonna have a spicy take later. Don't worry about it, okay?
Why wait? Like, why hold back one?
Because we don't want just hot takes all the way around, do we?
Sure,
I'll fucking do it.
go for it. Why are you blushing?
Lay it on.
Okay, so my face is always red. I obviously I didn't get to do the fight much in Mythic because the guild died by then. I can't remember because I swear I killed like 5 bosses in Mythic, so I must have done it in another guild. But
I think you and Nick did it together, yeah.
No, because we transferred and went to another guild. And he got in right away, and I needed like a week off because I couldn't get into the raid because my schedule didn't line up that week. And then they're like, all right, cool, we'll get you in the next week. And they ended up clearing everything up to Gahoon. And I was like, cool, I'm available. And they're like, sorry, we already started Gahoon. We don't want to swap people, mid-progress of boss fight, which I understood. So I basically got to play a lot of PoE Betrayal League that month. No, okay. This is the hot take. I really dislike Blizzard nerfing fights. I don't care if it's justified. I don't care if it needs to happen. But this is my spicy take. They should have fucking left it. Maybe this is my old elitism self coming out, but I remember walking into Cthulhu in AQ40 pre-nerf when it was legit unkillable, and that was some of the funnest things that I can think of as far as raiding goes, because you had to figure out how to kill this boss, even though it was impossible. Everybody was still like, no, I mean, they wouldn't put an impossible fight in this game. Like, we've got to figure it out. We got to do it, whatever. So when they nerf something and nerf it and nerf it and nerf it and nerf it, like, if one guild can kill it, every guild can kill it. That's just how I view. It's okay. I'll clarify. If one guild can kill it, theoretically, every guild in the world can kill it. Whether or not they actually can is up to player skill and dedication. But
time.
And time. You don't need to nerf it to make it accessible for everybody. Everybody else just needs to get good. That's my hot take for Fetid Devour.
Interesting hot take.
I don't want to spend 16 hours a week raiding to be able to kill bosses before the end of a tier.
That's fine. And they put LFR in the game just for you.
Yeah, just for me.
Just for you.
You're right. But to echo what both of you said, I really liked the room. I really liked how the pustules came in, like the whole spewing before it actually showed up. Although I thought it was really ridiculous just how long it took to spew. Like, all right, it's been spewing for like 40 minutes now. Is it gonna show up, or are we gonna get this thing going?
I do remember that. The visual cue was so long.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's still really cool. All right.
I don't want to talk about this next fight, man. Zul is an asshole.
Because you weren't a
skip it?
sub-rogue?
Well, actually, no. It's because I was on purge duty. So I didn't really get to play the fight. But, we can talk about it briefly.
I liked it.
I'll start. I didn't do it on Mythic. That's it.
Having an ad fight where you don't want to kill the ads because some classes benefit from having ads alive feels so fucking counterintuitive.
What up, Shadow Priest?
Yeah. It just feels so weird.
I'm just kidding. Nobody brought a Shadow Priest to that raid.
No one did. But yeah, on Mythic, all of the ads had a debuff, and only when the ad was purged and it didn't have the debuff, only then could it truly die. So my whole thing was, look, you have to sit there and single target the boss, and when I call it out, you have to tab over to the ad that has the debuff and purge it at like 5%, so it dies to random cleave, and then you have to like keep purging the debuff to make sure that ads are dying at certain times. That was the fight for me. It was really dumb, but I don't know. It felt really counterintuitive. I guess I do like the overall design of like how you had to like run out, how the room like exploded. At the end, it was just you were getting down to the floor. All the ads had their own abilities, so you had to constantly control the ads. Like the grip mechanic for people like getting thrown off and you had to save them. Like all that stuff was fine. It just feels weird to have a hectic ad cleave fight where the point is to not kill the ads. Seemed really, really bizarre.
I take a different stance. I liked that aspect where it goes against the norm. I obviously it would have been better if that wasn't the case, because, like you said, everything else about the fight was really, really cool. I think what you're specifically referring to, the keeping the ads up for sub rogues and
Frost mages,
sub rogues, yeah, so that they can get more single target damage on Zul. That was obviously, I think that's a strategy thing where that was very clearly the easiest way to get the kill. I don't think it was necessarily the only way, but when you've got an easy way and a hard way, why would you take the hard way?
Right.
So I get it.
fair.
So in that sense, I agree with you. I don't like that. Everything else about the fight, everything else about the fight, I actually really enjoyed. The one thing I forgot about was the people that would get like, I don't remember if it was mind controlled or a debuff, but they just like turn and start sprinting for the edge of the room and to jump off.
Mhm.
That was super cool to me. I like
Yeah.
Oh, so cool. Yeah.
That also gave priests a really good niche. Be like, okay, I'm gonna die, like I'm gonna jump off the edge, and all of a sudden, like the second the debuff ends, just zip grips right back to you, and
Yeah.
you save someone's life.
Yeah, it was super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you were a demon hunter, boomkin, or hunter, just ignore the mechanic because you can just come right back on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Double jump glide over. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, I just jumped off. Disengage. I'm back on.
Also, the grand arena where you had this gigantic platform felt really like it felt like an ordeal stepping into that fight too. Felt like you were really stepping into a battle arena instead of like the other bosses. You were just kind of stepping into an offshoot room it felt kind of small and cramped. Even though some of them looked really cool and had their own themes, like this was like the battlefield.
Yeah.
This felt like an arena.
That's something that like raids have always kind of done a poor job of doing. With the exception of probably Foundry in WoD. I don't know if you guys knew this. I love Foundry in WoD. Probably my favorite raid instance of all time.
It's one of the best.
It really is. Foundry had a really, really cool thing that they did where they had a theme, and that theme was prevalent throughout the whole raid instance. However, each boss also had something that, like, their room was not generic, but not incredibly unique to the point where you lost the theme. And I thought that was really, really cool. Unfortunately, there are other instances that, unfortunately, it just didn't work. Like, Talak, okay, yeah, you walk in, you got to take an elevator down, okay, cool, and then you're in a hallway where you got to fight Mother, okay. Now it opens up, and it's literally just corridors that go to other boss rooms, where if you take it out of the aspect of, like a raider or whatever, and you just think about the design of the instance, what the hell were these rooms for? Like, sure, Blizzard built them so that you'd have a boss room, but take that aspect out of it and think about it, like, legitimately, like, what was this room designed for originally?
Is this the greenhouse? Is this where they make
Exactly.
their food?
Exactly.
It would have made more sense if like each room had like a switch that like either deactivated a shield or like made the stairway like go up going to the middle. Like that would have made sense.
Yeah.
But just, oh, you killed all the bosses, I guess I'll drop the stairs and I'll let you come fight me.
I'll draw the parallel to the worst raid in the same expansion of the best raid. High Mall was absolutely terrible for that. The theme, you saw the theme initially in the arena, and then you're like, okay, cool, that's the theme. It's and then literally the next fight is one of 3 different fights. One that was kind of like in a mountainous, kind of rocky little room. Another one that was in the middle of kind of like another little blood pit, and another one was by the ocean, like for Brackenspore. Like, they're so disconnected that it almost feels like you're in a different instance. And that's kind of like what Uldir felt like for me until Zul, because then you're like, oh, it all converges onto here where shit's gonna get real. And then it turned out the fight kind of, eh.
The last thing I want to touch on with Zool is I liked the aspects of the fight that weren't really to do with the ads, like what you guys were talking about. The thing, I wish the ads weren't in it. Like, I wish they would have come up with a whole nother fight where it was just Zool, because he's the like, of all the characters, I guess Gahoon they built up a bit, but aside from Gahoon, Zool's the only character they really built up. And so then the fight becomes, well, you're doing damage to Zool, but the ads are really the most important part of the fight. It's kind of
well, I would say Mithrax also shares that kind of idea, because there was a whole zone dedicated to it, and we got a cool cutscene of him growing to a colossal size and basically blowing up the Great Seal with a laser beam. But yeah, Zool at the time felt like he was the BBEG, the big bad evil guy. He was the pinnacle. And then when we saw Mithrax again, it was like,
fight.
Yeah, you get to him and it's like, kill all my little subjects. It's
right.
like, okay, I guess that maybe that fits like, oh, I'm the Dark Emperor kind of thing, but like, I don't know. I do agree with you. Do it.
Yeah,
but yes,
absolutely.
Speaking of Mithrax, figure we just keep this train rolling.
Mithrax the Devourer.
Oh.
I'll say I love the orb aspect. I can't remember if it was like sanity or whatever that the tanks would get hit by, and they'd have to like pick up those little orbs or whatever. I love that. I even when I saw it again much later on, and we'll get to it with this last instance with Carapace. Well, specifically Carapace before that, because it didn't happen in Mythic, but in Heroic Phase 2, once you clear off the sides or whatever, you jump down, you fight him. Like, he's still got all that stuff. Sorry, my hand talking. I talk with my hand. That was really insensitive. Sorry to anybody that. Anyway, the aspect of that I really like is when something happens, even if it's a mistake or if it's a mechanic, you have a way to mechanically get yourself or get your team back into the fight by picking up those orbs or whatever. Some of it maybe absolutely necessary. Maybe sometimes it's an accident and you can just dig yourself out of the hole. It's really cool, as opposed to something like a patchwork fight where you fuck up and if the tank doesn't die, they're going to be at 10% and the healer's got to get him back out, over the span of like the next 3 minutes as they're all trying to catch up to the fact that he got crushed. Having a mechanical way to do that is a little bit more interesting to me. Aside from that, I hated that fight. I think it was terrible.
What I specifically hated...
I hate fights where you have to split up the group. I'm sorry, I just fucking hate them.
Yeah, the fact that it kind of felt like a, to put it into current terms, it kind of felt like a Drestagath fight, where like on heroic Drestagath, like when you're really undergeared, people just kind of run around crazily and just randomly kill the tentacles, and there's no order to it. But like that was a fight orbs. Yeah, but that was a fight where it's like there actually is no order. You have to be spread, so you can't just focus fire one down. But they also weren't like easy to kill, the ads that spawned. So you actually legitimately had to stay spread, had to like stay in your own little quadrants, and like you couldn't help focus fire. Otherwise you would just get killed. More specifically on Mythic, I enjoyed the fight a little bit more on Mythic. However, the strat that was the meta strat that was used to kill that boss was so stupid. It was incredibly dumb. Like, it was literally like the idea of Mythic plus snap pulling. And that was like, people agreed that was the only way to kill the boss, was to snap pull the ads when the laser beam comes out. And I was like, that is the dumbest fucking thing that they could ever do to make it so like it felt so imbalanced that if you didn't do it this way, the ads would just run around and do whatever the fuck they wanted. They couldn't be controlled, and like if any of them got I think it was a cast that you had to interrupt the cast, and if any of them got their cast off, it was basically a wipe. So the strategy was to snap pull them on some mushrooms on the side of the room, so you'd take a lock gate from one to the other. If you stepped off the mushroom and an ad wasn't with the group, it was over. It was a wipe already. And then the fact that you just sat there, you AoE'd them down, and you stunned them, and then the second you were done, you had to split back to your part of the room, otherwise you were too close to someone, and then you got killed. Like, that fight was so taxing as far as, like, the strategy that was invented to kill that boss. It just was not fun. Like, I think I had 200 pulls in that boss, and every pull it was like, Oh, fuck. Okay, here I go again. I'm gonna stand in the same spot, do the same things, and someone's gonna fall off a mushroom, or someone's not gonna stun like 1 second early, or when we're running back, someone's gonna take my path and clip me, and then I'm dead, and then we wipe the fight. Like, it was also an 8-minute plus fight. So stressful. So fucking stressful. It was
How
like the only fight in that instance that I think was not fun when you were actually doing it on Mythic Progression.
I think having any melee at all made that fight a lot less fun. I know that we were melee heavy, and well, let's talk about more on heroic because that's the only time Sai did it was on heroic. But we would have melee trying to knock other melee out of the orbs that would capture you, and you had to get knocked out by taking damage from other players, and then they would get caught in it, and then someone from the other side would knock the person that was about to get out back into it to try to get the person that just got themselves stuck in it. Oh my god, it was like watching the Three Stooges of people trying to knock each other out of orbs and just could not figure out you can't get too close, it'll snatch you too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching melee break out people that are mind controlled on Il'gynoth.
Oh,
Yeah.
Like, don't even try, guys. Come on.
Yeah, out of all the fights, Mithrax is the one just every single time I walked in that instance I would just see red. Like, I was even arranged, but just like, man, that fight even on heroic, it was just like, I don't want to do this fight. It's 8-minute slog of what essentially the only way people could figure out realistically how to do it was a shitty, janky strategy that had a lot of like internal flaw potential. Like, oh god, it was awful.
and,
It really was.
yeah, and just a perfect example of bring more range than melee to raid.
Speaking of which, on this next boss,
Oh,
the penultimate, the Gahoon.
the Kahuni.
The Gahoon. He was so hyped up too, and it was weird because I had all these thoughts of what Gahoon would be like, and then when I saw the dungeon journal, I was like, wait, he's just a giant fucking worm? What is this? Like, this isn't the boss I wanted.
It's the boss you deserve.
Kind of.
And
Oh.
it was less about Gahoon himself and more about, how to pass a ball from one person to another.
Yeah, the whole part of the fight was use this entire building that you were in was actually a machine to keep Gahoon in, and you just activated the machine and it basically just did most of the work for you.
Did the fight
like
for
that
you.
feels really fucking bad, by the way.
Right.
I don't like gimmicky fights. I will absolutely agree with you on that one. You had to split people up to do the soccer, to the football, and then you press a button and it takes 30% of his health points away, and it's like, okay. And then on top of that, it felt like that fight was less about killing Gahoon and more about killing ads half the time. You had the tentacles popping up all the time, you had those ads coming out all the time. Like, if we could just not have phase 1, that would have been a fine fight.
Well, see, I actually somewhat disagree. Like, as far as gimmicks go, I thought that the basketball, football, soccer thing, whatever you want to call it, I thought that was okay. Like, it required coordination from multiple people. It was a process, and yeah, you couldn't repeat it, so it kind of had that, like, Xanesh kind of vibe to it, if you think about, like, current WoW. But, like, it could have been a lot worse. I do think it could have been designed possibly a little bit better, but I actually thought that the football, basketball, whatever part was actually fine. What I didn't like is that just, okay, you're doing that, and then just it's a laser beam, and the laser beam makes him take 500% more damage, and you just lust and you burn him, and you do that twice, and then you get to the last part, and then he's just not resilient anymore, and you just kill him. Like, that kind of concept of just like, it's not really you that's killing the boss, it's your single mechanic that you do that basically does the fight. Like, that felt really bad.
Yeah, there were two important parts to that, and that mechanic was so important that if you could speed that up, it made the fight so much easier. Like, if you got people that could just toss and get it done in and quick, then that fight was just so much easier. And then the very end, so to me, like, that's one of the important parts is getting that down quickly. And the other important part is the very end, whenever you've got all the mechanics going out all at once, whenever it, the fight is really getting into the thick of it. I thought that was actually great, that the hard part was the end. Even though, it was short because he had barely any health and you were just burning him down, but all the shit was coming out.
Yeah.
I'm just not a huge fan of gimmicks.
I do agree, but I think that for this in particular instance, like, at least the gimmick wasn't something dumb. It didn't seem dumb to me, at least.
Okay, I can agree. If I was Hazakostas or whoever did these raid encounters, I would change that fight in a very minimalistic way that would have major consequences. I would make him, like Gahoon, just have like a massive fucking shield, or percentage damage taken less, and you have to blast him twice with a laser. It doesn't do damage, it just chips away at that shield, and then after like a minute he gets his shield back, and then you got to go and do it again, and then after the second time his shield's gone, you go straight into phase 3 and just nuke. I think that probably would have been a little bit more fun and less like, yay guys, we pressed a button and an ancient device killed the raid boss.
Yeah. I do have to say, though, even though I hate how Gahoon was just a giant fat worm, I hated how it was an ad fight, which I guess kind of makes sense because he's a blood god and, whatever, he doesn't need to do his own fighting. But, like, past all that stuff that you can say was either bad or good, the aesthetic of that room was amazing. When you got to phase 3, and it like your screen was shaking and rocks were falling and it felt like the entire building was collapsing on top of you to like kill this boss, that felt really cool. The whole theatrics of that last room, that was like the Contagion Blood God. That was the room that I was expecting. Spiderweb shit everywhere, there's pustules growing out of the ground, there's blood like all over the floor. The fucking, as you're killing him, he destroys the building and the room's fucking caving in, you're trying to finish him off before it caves in completely. Like, that's a cool end to a raid, in my opinion. But, some of the other stuff, debatable whether or not it was good or bad.
Yeah. Alright, and that's it for Uldir. Now on to the second tier. You're an idiot. Battle of Dazara Lore.
BOD was
Didn't do it.
pretty fun. I thought out of all the raids in this expansion, I think BOD is like the moment where it was like, okay, the expansion actually doesn't look too bad. Like, this raid is actually really good. And like that was a really big redeeming quality, and I think that's why the expansion stayed alive and even had some more players coming back as far as it did. Also, aesthetically, the whole, it's a faction war, and then actually we got the faction war. That it felt like it fit really well. I thought it should have been the first raid, but, whatever.
Right.
I'll complain a little bit less.
I think overall the fights were really interesting in BOD, and this one I did a couple bosses on Mythic, but mostly I just did Heroic.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about champions. What was your take on champions? Because we also have to, mention that for the first 3 bosses of this raid, depending on if you were Horde or Alliance, you had different encounters. So it was, if you were a Horde, you were fighting like the Champions of Light of the Zandalari, and if you were... Oh, wait, no, I had that backwards. If you're a Horde, you were fighting the Champions of Light of Alliance that were, like, coming to invade, and if you were Alliance, you were, like, breaching the gate at the docks, and you were fighting the Champions of Light of the Zandalar. So that's, like, an interesting... Have they ever done that before?
No, not that I know of.
Oh, they did faction champions and...
Wrath.
Wrath, but that wasn't... I mean, that was the only thing closest to, like, a PvP raid boss kind of thing. But right. It wasn't remotely like this. For the record, the next 2 sections, I'm largely going to remain silent because I cleared this raid instance one single time on Heroic and never went back. And the next one, I have never even stepped it.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, you mean the little shit one?
Crucible or Eternal?
The 2 boss one?
Yeah, okay, Crucible, yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, I thought you were talking about Eternal Palace, and I was actually going to question you for a second. But no, we're okay. Let's keep going.
Played it one time in Heroic on a rogue.
So
fair.
Champs, just like I said about Talik, easy boss. Probably kill it on Mythic before you kill Jaina on Heroic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was also like once you were geared, that fight was really short. Like I'm talking like. I think push groups were doing it like a minute 30 seconds. I could be wrong, but like It was a fast fight, regardless. Like I think it was like 3 minutes when you were killing it on progression, which is kind of weird.
But yeah, nothing really much to say there. It's a kind of an ad fight. I mean, you control the ads while killing. I mean, you eventually kill them, but there wasn't really much to it.
Yeah, like the ad. Well, the thing with the ads though is that they had all their own abilities, so it was like you had to identify which each one, like what each one did. So there was like a little bit of nuance, but it wasn't hard. It was literally just you walk up and you blow up the ads, you chain nuke the boss while you're doing it, and then like be careful of like looking mechanic. Which, by the way, as a side note, I hate mechanics where it's like if your character is looking this way, something bad happens. Like it's just an extra little annoyance that you have to keep track of. Like the fact that that was like one of the main mechanics of that fight was kind of annoying. But I thought it was an okay fight. Just a little ad cleave.
So, Grong, which you either fought as Horde, you fought living Grong, and as Alliance, you fought undead Grong. But same,
Yeah.
again, same fight.
Grong was really cool. Grong had an interesting mechanic to it. You know, some ads, you get an interactable thing, and it was a fight where, and I'm trying to figure out the way to construe this to make it make sense, but like, it was a choose your own adventure fight, where it was like, okay, your guild can actually decide how many of the tectonic slams you want to do at what time. Like, if you were crazy and you had a cooldown like Spirit Link, you could proc it at what essentially is a really bad time, and then you could just like skip some phase, or you could like basically cheese out later phases of the fight. It was the mechanic, you know, you can trigger it at whatever energy you want. So it gave you the ability to choose how the fight actually went. So like from group to group, the strats were completely different as far as the timing and when to use stuff, because no groups did it the same.
I think one thing about Grong though was it slapped surprisingly hard because of that. Like if you wanted to do it the quick way, it was gonna knock the shit out of you.
Yeah, very true.
For the second boss, especially considering it's just the second boss, it had so high damage. It's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Was
I
that
think
the
it was kind of
gorilla that would like throw people at other people?
Yes.
Yeah, that was like what it did in like the cutscene, but yeah,
Okay.
that is the boss you're thinking of.
That's cool.
No,
Yeah.
he would pick up people and throw them. He'd pick up the tanks and launch them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he would like pick up the tank and like throw him somewhere.
Yeah, as I was talking about it, or as you were talking about it, I was thinking, yes, he does have that ability, which I didn't even remember, because I'm pretty sure in all the mythic progression that I did and all the reclears, I don't think I experienced that probably more than 3 times total. So
Right. Well, it was melee.
I probably just got lucky.
He'd pick up no, I guess
He'd pick up tank and throw it at anyone.
Out of range. Oh yeah, it was anyone.
Yeah, he would pick it up and throw it at anyone. So if you were playing like a melee, you'd have to run out because it would cleave everyone that was hit within a certain yard radius.
Yep.
So it was a get out mechanic, and then it hit really fucking hard. So you had to use a mechanic, or you had to be topped off. But no, decent fight. I would have actually thought that would have been the. Obviously, since it hit too hard, it doesn't make sense. But I think that would have been a really good elementary fight, like similar to Talek, where I say Talek was like kind of different than the norm than what you were thinking of, like because it had like a cool aesthetic to it. It felt different. It had like different mechanics. Like Grong was kind of that fight for me. It's like you get to choose how you want to do the fight, how your guild approaches it, how many stacks they do, so you design it around whatever you decide to do. So I think that would have been a cool first fight, but
Yeah.
Grong was fine. I think Grong was on the better side of fine, but he wasn't incredible by any means.
And you know, it's funny. I'm looking over the different fights, and they just they got progressively better the entire raid. Because I'm thinking Champs is dull. Grong had a little bit of interesting. You get to pick your fight, and he actually slaps. Jade Fire Masters, I guess, will be on the same level as Grong. It was definitely interesting. You got one that was the green dragon, and the other was the fire hawk. It's a fire hawk.
Yeah, it was a Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're going to it now, Jade Fire Masters. Man, I don't know why, but like sometimes
As
when
an
you're in a
observer,
raid,
the Simon Says
I was
God.
looks
I
really
was just
cool.
about to get to that.
It looks
People-
really cool.
I
I'm just
could
gonna say
not-
I've never done the fight, but It looks super cool.
I could not
So
believe how often people would fuck that up.
I made a statement when we were talking about Champions of Light that I hate when you have to like force look your character a certain direction. But the thing when you get picked up by Jadefire Masters and the clones like fly into you, and if you're looking at them, you don't get one shot. Like that was fine. Like that was okay. Like at least you get teleported to your own little world, and that's the only thing you have to focus on. In retrospect, it's like, oh, I'm casting this thing, and you just have to do it. Like, and if you don't do it, you just die. Like this is obviously one of those same instances. If you don't do it, you die. But like it was definitely a lot nicer. Like it was definitely like, oh, you're isolated, just do this thing. It was really clear cut and simple. But like yeah, it was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Also, there were also some classes where it was just like you'd die to the fall damage because it would just drop you from like 1,000,000 feet. Yeah, if you're a demon hunter, you just didn't care. You just, okay, I'm sitting there. The things hit you from behind. You're like, oh, I don't care. Oh, I'm falling. Double jump. Hey, can a priest give me feather fall real quick? Like there were ways to cheese it, but that was an interesting ability. The thing that I liked the most was the maze.
I like cheating the maze.
That too.
I liked how delayed the rings were actually, because I guess I was playing my hunter, the boomkin, at the time, because I would disengage through them no problem. Because by the time it actually reacted, it was actually pushing me further into the maze. Like, all right, I'll just skip the whole maze. Sure.
And the hard part with the maze on Mythic is that you had to pick up all those orbs to help break the shield.
Yeah.
But like, if you had a lock gate or if you had an elemental shaman, you could just Ghost Wolf pick it up. You don't care about slow. You just run straight through. Yeah, there's a bunch of shit to dodge on the ground, but man, the hitbox showed up and then it exploded like a year later. So that could have been a little bit faster to make the fight harder, but I think it was more fun than it was difficult. Like stepping in there and being like, oh, this actually isn't scary. Like this is actually really easy. But this also is different, so it's fun.
Speaking of, we just did that last week or the week before. We did the achievement run for Battle of Dazar'alor, and I had to carry the egg. Mm-hmm. That's a lot more stressful whenever you can't get hit by any of the fire, and you can't move. You can't use any abilities, so you can't run faster. So I'm just sitting there hauling ass around the maze, carrying an egg, trying not to get hit by red shit.
Could you have had a shaman just Ghost Wolf and pick it up? Or does it deactivate the Ghost Wolf, or can you not pick it up when they're transformed?
I don't know. I know that if a rogue used his area stealth and I had the egg, it would despawn the egg. So yeah,
that's bad. Well, at least that's an achievement-based thing and not the normal raid mechanic. If that was the normal raid mechanic, that fight would have been a lot more interesting, for sure.
That's for sure.
But yeah, really cool aesthetic. I like the fact that it was two bosses and they actually like had different themes going on. They were casting different abilities. The maze was cool. The little thing where you fly up in the air. The meteors, like being in the little cloud and dodging the little rune or beam that goes around it. That was fine. It was. I think it was better than Grong, just as you had mentioned before. Like the fights are progressively getting better, but like other than the aesthetic and like the little maze, that fight was pretty dull. Like get away from the group. Okay, you got the thing. Look at the things. Okay, walk into the cloud. Break the ad. Leave them. Both the bosses down. Okay, there's a maze. Run to the end of the maze and break the wall. We already have people assigned for the little things, and then just lust so you don't hit into your rage. Like kind of dull overall, but I think it's still in a positive direction in comparison to the other ones.
But speaking of that, I will change my mind. I think the next two should be flipped. So Opulence was next, but I think it was a better fight than the fight after it.
Opulence was so fucking cool, and kind of like the Grong in a sense, where you get to choose your own adventure in a very weird way. The little gems and how they like you're halfway through the fight hypothetically, and you get to this room and it's like choose your power up, and it's like, oh shit, like I can do some really cool things. But obviously later your guild lead decided what, ones you're gonna pick up and how you actually interact with them and stuff like that. But like,
detected.
Yeah, fun detected. But like the fact that they gave you basically a superpower partway through the fight and were just like, figure out how to use this thing optimally, but like this is the intended things that you need for the fight, was really, really cool. And then the changing positions on Mythic, that was really that was probably the best way they could have like added that Mythic mechanic. You just randomly get teleported with someone from the other side. You'd have a little bit of notification. As long as you were smart, standing still, you didn't take damage. But just like going from one phase to the other and being like, okay, I'm a range, so I'm going left, and all of a sudden you get teleported and you're like, oh shit, now I have to deal with the melee group where I have to constantly be moving and I do no damage. And then like you have to pick up a different crystal because you're on the different side and stuff like that. It was really fun though. Yeah. That last room though, mixed feelings about the gold.
How so?
So on Mythic, the way that you were supposed to like get as much space as possible is there was a long hallway that was going from like where you initially started to Opulence that opened up. Like you couldn't normally take it, but there was this big long hallway. And so you would take the gold and then you just via lockgate and you just drop at the very end of this hallway, and then the gold would expand. So like every single time that you dropped it, you were losing less and less space. So it's just like, oh yeah, we just put all the gold in this hallway and you never have to think about it again. But if anyone dropped it in the main room, it was just over. So it was like, okay, we're on a time limit, but like we're using this really stupid part of the room that really should not exist. This hallway that just like has no fucking purpose. It's just like here for some random ass reason, and then that's how you did the fight. Just, oh yeah, go the hallway, drop the gold, take the lock gate. It's like a 20-second run. Sorry about your damage, sorry about your healing, whatever.
Right.
So that hallway shouldn't have been there, and it would have been a much more interesting last phase.
And we get the, you know, about a minute of going Hulk on ads with your superpower.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, for when I was doing it, I had that Topaz gem, and if you weren't near people, you would get stacks, and then when you hit 20 stacks, everyone near you got a huge buff, so it was like, I have to isolate myself in Africa, and oh, look at that, I got the buff, and you'd run to the group, and it was like, you timed it right when the ads spawn, and just, you go crazy. And also, another thing that we haven't touched on a whole lot is like the damage numbers that people were pulling from like fight to fight. Like the single target fights, like 30k-ish was like really high for some of these single target fights. When you got to Opulence, because of all the buffs, it was like 100, like not 100, it was probably like 75k. It was like really good.
Yeah.
It's like people just popped off suddenly. Yeah, aesthetically, fight made sense. Gold vault, huge coin elemental thing. All the gems were really cool. The pathways were really fun. Like, once you got to that last room, though, just they should have gotten rid of that hallway. That would have made the fight better for me. Oh, and then also the extra reward of when you kill it, and there's all the little gold piles on the ground. You can go pick up BOEs and like really expensive gold stuff. That helped with repair costs a little. That was a nice added bonus.
I agree.
Wait, so you could actually loot the place?
Yeah, so like when you killed Opulence, it exploded, and there were like 100 loot piles on the ground, and like the dialogue is like. Another thing to explain. When you were Horde, you got changed into Alliance here. That's something we probably should have said. So you had all new racial abilities, you had all new Mog and stuff like that. But when you were running into that room, it was like, the thing was like, we went into their vault and we killed their guards. And like when you end the fight, it was like, I can't remember who said it, but it was like one of the Horde characters that's like telling you the story was like, and then the savages looted all of our gold, and there's gold piles everywhere, and you just go up and you pick it up, and it give you like 150 gold. And you go up to the next one, it's like a jade idol worth like 200 gold vendor. And you're just like, oh shit. And people would, when the fight ended, people would lust to be able to loot the gold piles faster before they despawned. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's super cool. Badass. Yeah, super cool, like, lore interaction plus just, like, mechanical little fun time afterwards. Like, oh, cool, we killed the boss. Quick, lust, burn all the shit. Like, pop berserking, go loot all the piles. Like, hey, haste buff. Like, that was a really cool ending part to it. I really, really liked Opulence.
Thanks, Blizzard. We noticed and appreciated.
As an observer, that fight always looked kind of cool.
Also, one other thing that I want to say about that fight, the trinket from there, that trinket never should have existed. That trinket was stupid fucking broken.
The one where you had to stand apart? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even remember like the first part of it, but it's a sliver, and it's like, oh yeah, if you're just grouped with people, you just do like an extra like billion damage basically. Like the stacking, I think it was stacking crit or stacking verse, like that it would give you is just way too good.
Incandescent sliver, and you had to stand away from people for it to stack.
Yeah.
No, you had to group up. That's right. You had to group up with other people with the sliver, but you couldn't be near people that didn't have it.
Yeah, but it was like that trinket was just so good that like Melee were using it. Like Melee were just given this inch trinket on heroic off runs because it was just so much stat. It was really dumb. But cool. I digress.
All right, now on to Conclave, which is mechanically, I think it was. I enjoyed it about as much as Opulence. I still liked Opulence more overall.
I didn't like the Mythic mechanic, but I liked the rest. The rest was really cool.
Was the Mythic mechanic the frog?
No, the Mythic mechanic was the Bwam Sandi randomly popping out of nowhere. Just, hey, what are you doing here? And then he just curses someone. and if you decursed, like 20 seconds later, it jumped to someone else. But the thing is that like the curse never truly went away. So at the end of the fight, everyone had the curse, and it was the only way to heal someone was a healer would have to cleanse and then heal that person for like 3 seconds until the curse like reapplied to them. So it was kind of a hard enrage, but just like, why is Blomsandi randomly here? Why is he randomly just throwing out curses? And like, again, like it was a really healer intensive fight, and the fact that the curse was just like, if you have this curse, you can't be healed. It's like, oh shit. Well, that kind of throws a fucking wrench in the gears.
Yeah, that's just
about that.
odd mechanic to throw in there, but I guess it would be kind of necessary. Well, some mechanic would be necessary to make the mythic more difficult because heroic version was
Cake.
Yeah.
But killing each one of them, and then like they all get healed, but they all have their own special abilities, and they'll get empowered depending on the woman. It was a really fun fight. Like, it was, I'd say, as far as council fight goes, probably one of the best council fights that I have seen. But again, I'm kind of a greenhorn as far as the total life expectancy of WoW. But really fun fight. Just that mythic mechanic just put a weird taste in my mouth.
And it's another choose your own adventure. Which one do you want to empower?
Yeah, I really like that player agency, that player choice. You know, looking at it being like, well, we could kill this one first because when its ability goes off, it does a stupid amount of damage, and that was the thing. And it was like, but this other one also does that. However, when it's empowered, nothing else happens, just more damage, so the healers just have to heal through it. So you like choose what is on paper like an unoptimal route to make it as easy for the entire raid group as possible. So that's kind of an interesting choice for that portion. But yeah. I liked it. I liked the whole fight. Just not that myth mechanic.
Alright, so Rastakhan, the king himself.
I'll let you go first.
Another ad fight. But I think it would have been better if the ads weren't in it, but you still had Rastakhan. I actually do like the split, especially in this particular instance of you've got this half the raid going to deal with Blonsomdi, and this half the raid is going to deal with Rastakhan. And I liked that, and I liked how like the whole quest line, the whole Zandalari quest line, like led up to this. Like it was Rastakhan accepting Blonsomdi as his Loa, and now this is how Blonsomdi is going to pay him back. Yeah,
lore-wise, like, amazing fight. And it made sense for, like, that was, like, the quote-unquote ultimate fight for the Alliance, because when you killed Rastakhan, then you would switch to Horde. That's when you would go do the other three Horde bosses. But as far as, like, the ending fight for the Alliance, it was awesome. You're storming the capital, you know, you go in, and all of a sudden you find this god has made the Loa has made a pact with the king, and the king is now super strong. And just this dead, like, dreadlord kind of, like, vibe to it. Like, it was a really cool aesthetic fight. And the room, like, I would think that the entire castle should be, like, gold and sparkly and bright. And then you get to the throne room, and it's, like, dark blue flames in this really kind of weird room. And there's, like, mist on the floor, like, this really evil death vibe. It's like, wow, that's a big turn as far as, like, story and lore go.
I didn't do it on Mythic, so what was the Mythic mechanic?
I'm trying to remember exactly what the Mythic mechanic was. I think it was what happened in the second phase when you had to split the realms. Oh, yeah, okay, so you would get a debuff, like, when you were in, like, the quote-unquote phase, like, 1.5, when Blomsandi actually came out after you killed all the ads.
Yeah.
There would be people that would be targeted by gates, and the gates were what spawned the orbs in the normal realm, but it also is what ate the orbs in the shadow realm. So the goal was you had to position those gates in a certain way to make like a barrier for the people that were in Blonsomdi's realm, so it was impossible to be a melee.
That was
because if you touch the gates, that was heroic as well.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the mythic mechanic is then, to be 100% honest.
All right. Yeah, I remember I enjoyed that because we had our little shield of gates in the semicircle at the entrance of the room. And so we just have everyone hide behind those gates.
Yeah, and like if you were ranged, you had to go in the down group, had to attack over the gates. You would burn them really hard. And then there were all the the other little abilities too, which made it was kind of weird because I felt like Rastakhan, when you were actually fighting him, it almost felt like a weird PvP fight because he had like 8 different abilities. He could summon frogs, he could summon the totems that would mind control people, he would do the big explosion, he would do like a chain lightning attack, then he would be meleeing the tanks and applying tank buffs. He felt like a character with like a bunch of moves. So it wasn't just, oh, the boss is meleeing you, here's its one ability it's going to do. It was like, oh, he has like a toolkit. It feels like he had a spell book that he was casting from. So that's another thing that I kind of liked. A lot of variance.
Yeah.
Not just the same dull, I meleeed the tank. We'll get there. Tina, looking at you.
And also, you had a debuff that stacked up on you in the Death Realm. You had to step into the gates to drop it.
And then it pulls the shit ton of damage. Yeah, that was rough. But yeah, overall, really good fight. Kind of felt weird that when you got him down to like, I think it was when you got Wamsani down to 60%, he kind of just bitched out. Like that kind of feels bad, but for lore reasons, I can understand it. You don't just kill Aloa and the king of the temple. Like, I guess that makes sense, and Wamsani is going to show up later, but like, oh, he just gets 60%. Oh yeah, I'm just going to leave you, and then like he's forsaken. It's like, seems kind of weird, but you know, I digress. Still a fun fight.
And now,
just again, the aesthetic of that room just killed it for me. It was so good, so good.
We get to the final 3.
Yeah, when you switch back to Horde. And apparently that was a really weird change for a lot of Alliance characters. Like, Alliance characters were, like, complaining, like, oh, now I have to be Horde. I was like, why do you guys care? Like, we've already cleared, like, Limit and Method already cleared it, so, like, why are you complaining? Like, just just go have fun being a Horde for, like, 2 hours.
Enjoy the better racials.
Yeah. Oh, but this next fight. I could talk about this next fight for hours. I'm going to make a bold statement. For people that have done Mechatork, I think Mechatork was my favorite encounter in this entire expansion.
Entire expansion, huh?
In the entire expansion. I loved Mechatork. Mechatork not only was my class one of the best classes for this fight, maybe that's, skewing it a little bit, but the mechanic that you had to do and how technically easy it was on paper, but how complex it was and how unpuggable it was for groups because of the required coordination, it was so cool, man.
Everybody knows LA Shamans are the worst class in the game and always will. Come on.
Well, there are some logs that show Ellie as the top 100 parses on that fight, so I think that specific fight begs to differ.
I'm glad you had one fight.
One fight, that was it.
That's your one. Now enjoy obscurity for the next 15 years.
Oh, I know. But for people that haven't done the fight, for people that haven't done the fight, there was a mechanic that in some cases was a guild destroyer. It was the #1 pug killer, but there were these little robots. 3 people would randomly get shrunk, and they have to jump inside of a robot, and then there was a color above the robot. The player could not see the color, but other people in the raid could, and they had to call out the other people's colors. And then you had to click the button, and if you missed the button, dead.
On higher difficulties, only the other people in the robots could see your color. So the trick was you couldn't just, say all 3 of us are in a robot. I couldn't just call out Rise's colors and him jump out. Or I could do that. I could call out Rise's colors and him jump out. But then Jay and I would have to go back and forth. And then before he jumps out, he has to say my last color, or else I don't know.
Yeah, so it would be like if it was the 3 of us, I would call out Jay is blue and Meeps is red, and then one of you 2 would have to call out my color, and then all 3 of us click it, and then we do the next 2 colors. But right before we got to the 3rd color, if I said, Jay is red and Meeps is blue, and you both clicked it, you jumped out, all of a sudden I'm stuck in the bot, and then I die. So it was really hectic.
I've never done the fight, so this curiosity is piquing me.
Sure.
How many color options are there? Because it
5.
Seems to me
4.
if I...
4 or 5.
There's 5.
Well, then you got a 50% chance to wipe the raid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, to clarify,
some odds I can live with.
If you clicked the wrong color, it didn't one-shot kill you, but it threw you out of the bot, and the bot was pulsing damage, and you were stunned for, I think it was 20 seconds. So you were just standing in the pulsing damage, and the pulsing damage would one-shot you. So if you missed the button, unless a pre-script you were dead in 0.25 seconds, but... I digress. But yeah, it was cool that every individual player, not just a raid lead, every individual player had to be like, "Oh, I'm shrunk. I'm going to the bot," and then you would have to figure out on the fly who calls out what, who's doing what. And then also the other part of the mechanic that was the mythic mechanic is not only did people get smaller, people could step on the small people and it would kill them. Like it was like you're stepping on like a mouse and you just one shot it. But there was also someone that got really, really big, and that big person could one-shot anyone that they stood on, but they also got a really big damage increase. So it was really cool of like this moment of like, okay, the ability's coming out, 3 people get small, and they have to get away from the group so they don't get stepped on, but the one big person can't move, and everyone else has to then run away from the big person, and that one big person basically gets to pad for like a minute. But again, the thing is that if those bots are coming over, or if Mekator casts an ability where you need to move, the little people need to be in their own group, otherwise they get killed if they're not in a bot. And the big person has to be in his own little area, because if he steps on anyone, he dies. And then
that's something that I want to point out is like there's so many of these mechanics going on at the same time, and then he'll teleport everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
And so
he teleports.
You have to wait
everyone
for
to the same spot,
all the little
and then
ones
everyone
to run.
Move.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to wait for the little people to run, and then the middle people to run, and then the big guy run. And to top it all off, there was another mechanic where he threw bombs on people, and they blew up in an LOS, and there were 3 little rubble pieces on the corners of the room, and you would have to run behind them and drop off the bomb to blow up, and if anyone was LOS of you, you would just one-shot each other, but it would also leave a puddle, so you had to like optimize not only who goes to which blockade to drop off the bomb, but you also had to be very careful about your positioning, about where you actually blew it up to make sure it didn't clip anyone else that was hiding, and that you didn't take up too much space on the floor to make it impossible for the next set of people to LOS as well.
And
like, all of this was happening, and then there's more.
Yep. It was a really hectic fight, but yeah, what was the name of that like Giga Blast that he did?
I don't remember the exact name, but his big, frontal cone thing. Yeah. It just like if you got hit, like it would telegraph for like it was probably like a 2-second cast, and if you got hit by it, you'd just be knocked back and you'd just die. It'd be over. It just would do way too much damage.
He'd Kamehameha, and it'd just be a ball that goes out in front of him, and it'll travel the whole way around. So you could be like, if the boss was positioned poorly, like the tank had him facing the wrong way, then that ball could go straight to someone who's hiding behind rubble, and they don't have anywhere to go. But they
and then it would knock them out from behind the pillar. The bomb would explode, and then it went because they weren't an LOS, or because they were an LOS.
So yeah, I completely understand why it's your favorite fight of the expansion. It was a hectic
and we can move on, but that's phase 1. Like there is an intermission phase, and there is phase 2 where more happens. That's just phase 1. So we can go on to the next boss, but man, out of all the fights, hot take, Mekatork was my favorite in the entire expansion. It was just this shit show clusterfuck that had so much coordination. Everyone had to know exactly what they're doing, and one person, multiple facets of the fight could wipe the entire raid. Like it was just, if you killed Mekatork, you were a top tier raider. If you were on heroic, you were a top tier heroic raider. If you killed on mythic, you were top tier mythic rating. Like that fight was amazing. Just
you were ready
all the
for
way
raiding.
around. Mm-hmm.
All right then.
All right.
We'll take
a couple steps down the dock to Stormwall Blockade.
Oh yeah. This is another one that Jay would love because it's got a gimmick and you have to split the raid.
Yeah. And ads.
Man, coach.
Yeah, Stormwall. Go ahead.
I really liked Stormwall. I like the idea of splitting the raid. I think it allows more coordination between the two groups, because instead of coordinating with 20, you're coordinating more directly with 10 to do more precise things, like killing the sirens for some, or ignoring the sirens because, hey, you're pulling a hunter can just disengage back onto the platform after getting pulled off, that sort of thing. But
and like also the nice part was that the bosses at 50, like the 2 mini human bosses at 50% would teleport. So it didn't matter which boat you were on, you had to do everything at one point. Yep. So it kind of held you accountable. But like one of the mechanics was like, oh, it's going to take up the floor, and then the other mechanic is we're just going to laser beam a bunch of different parts of the boat. So if you dropped a bunch of bad shit on the floor, and then you all of a sudden had the laser beams, you had to plan for that. Vice versa, if you were, doing the part we had to drop stuff on the floor, and then all of a sudden a siren would pull you into it because you weren't paying attention, then you get killed that way. So it was multifaceted of like you really had to pay attention. And then it went to phase 2 where it was very, very different, but it still had like similar like abilities, so it wasn't like 100% foreign.
And the coordination, whenever you're out on the boats, you even had to do some pretty tight coordination with each side because you couldn't let them get too far apart in damage. So you couldn't burn one to 60 and then have the other one at 50.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the boat part was really good. I'll say though, the boat part was fine. I personally did not like the platform part, where you had to like go back to the dock and you had to actually kill the boss and deal with the ads, because like the ads were too important. But the enrage timer on Mythic, you needed to just kill the boss. Like the whole strategy was like you just slow those ads into oblivion until they're barely able to touch the boss, and then everyone would turn, nuke it for 5 seconds, and you'd be back in the boss because you just could not afford it any other way. Like the enrage timer, especially on progression, because it was like 8 minutes were enrage, and like fast guilds were killing it in like high 6 minute, low 7 minute. So it was such a crunch that you had to do it perfectly, or it felt impossible.
And dropping the shit off was like a lesson in choreography. Like, everyone move up, everyone move right, everyone move up.
Mm-hmm. Like melee, you have to be stacked. Okay, now spread. No, stack. Now spread. Okay, now run over this boss. We need to slow it. Okay, help soak this mechanic. Don't get knocked off the platform. Okay, range. You guys are gonna do the dance where you're just altering your position, but you're all staying stacked at all times. And if someone's one step too far, everyone dies. That part felt a little bad, but I'd say it was an okay fight.
What'd you say,
I didn't hate
Jay?
Stormwall.
I was gonna say, and then we're gonna have to get used to that because we get the dance next expansion.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, Jay can actually throw in on this one because he helped us with the mount runs we did on Jaina.
I love the multi phase part of the fight. I have no idea how phase 3 is supposed to go because we never did it when we were doing mount farming. But yeah, I love how you start on the boat, you deal with the stuff there, then she freezes it, you gotta chase her, and then after that, presumably something else happens. But I don't know what happens there. But yeah, that to me is really cool. I like when a boss fight with multiple transition points like changes the environment. It kind of goes back to my favorite raid of all of WoW, Foundry, the last boss. You literally, the floor would cave in and be like Mortal Kombat when you uppercut somebody into a fucking level, and you got to go fight them there. That is cool, and the fact that we were chasing Jaina through there is dope.
Yeah.
No idea what phase 3 is supposed to be.
That fight on Mythic, though, the first part on the boat, a lot longer than, how we were doing on the mount runs, but it had a lot of mechanics going on. Like, the boat was, getting fucking torched by bombs, and you had griffins dropping grenades, and the floor was, like, getting parts where there were ice, and you were dropping avalanches to get rid of the fire. However, a little bit of a hot take for the fight as a whole. I would actually compare the fight kind of to Gahun, to where, especially in the second phase and going into the third phase, there was like an imprinted mechanic that you couldn't skip, that you had to do, and it was the only thing that enabled the boss, and it's like, you had to do this thing, and once you did the thing, you were fine. And then you had to play around doing that thing, and that was the whole mechanic with the cold. And I think that it's a good mechanic to have. It was definitely a good idea, and overall I liked it. But man, it was really stressful to, like, at certain intervals, it's like, okay, well, now you have to stack differently. Now you have to move as a group differently. You have to interact with fire on the floor to cleanse your cold stacks, otherwise you'll just get one shot eventually. But you can't get hit by any of the ice moves because then you get frozen, and then if you get frozen, you have to get broken out, and then you have 5 more stacks, and then you have to find fire to cleanse the frost stacks off of you. So it was like the entire fight was really just how good can you manage those buffs. Like, there were these big fireball containers that were ingrained in the ice. You had to drop the arcane mortars onto them to be able to damage them, and then when you broke them, they lit on fire. That's how you cleanse your stacks. So it was like the second phase in reality was dancing around this giant platform trying to not get killed by this big icicle cone that runs through the middle of the room, or not getting killed by the frost orb. But it really, the damage didn't matter as much as, okay, we have to break this, fireball now to make sure that we can cleanse people because it's just becoming unhealable. So it kind of felt like a Hoon, where it's like the fight really was just do this thing and you can kill it, or you can get to the next phase. That's what the middle phase kind of felt like. And then for Jay, the last phase, it was actually really cool when she hits, I think it's 30%, she ice blocks, and then she has this thing that expands from her. You have to lust and break a wall. Also, another fun thing is that if you lusted at any point during the fight, she would just ice block. Like actual PvP player would. So you couldn't actually lust on Janus, you had to lust for this little ice wall. And then you go break Nathanos out of an ice wall, you kill some ads, and then Nathanos comes back and helps you kill the boss at the end. And then at the end part, it's literally just a soft enrage to beat the boss before you get killed by frost axe. So again, I think overall really cool fight. The aesthetic, fighting her on a giant iceberg that she basically trapped you on, all of the frost spells that she can use, arcane barrages, all that stuff is really, really cool. But it felt gimmicky when the whole fight in reality, when you really think about it on progression, like pull 300, it suddenly clicked like, all I'm doing is fighting a frosty. I just need to cleanse. As long as I cleanse, we can be here for another 2 minutes. Like, it doesn't become unhealable. As long as we break this fireball thing at the right time, it's totally fine. As long as, we're fighting to run over to that fire patch right at the last second so we don't get frozen by her frost ability. All that stuff kind of felt gimmicky. How do you feel, Meeps?
I agree largely with like how that felt. I think it was really cool though that they used Jaina to pretty much display a mage. Like, you were fighting a mage and you know it every step of the way, from the frost spells to whenever you lush, you'd ice block, and the arcane spells, and then you fight her big water elemental to free Nathanos. I thought it was cool that they actually added that in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it made her felt more like a character,
right,
than more like a boss. But yeah, I do agree. I think that aspect was really. But yeah, overall, BOD probably the saving grace for this expansion would be my also hot take, little hot take.
Mostly
Lukewarm,
Mechatork.
to be honest. That's a lukewarm take.
Man. That's fair. I mean, I think it was probably the best rate of the expansion, but we'll get to there later. Now let's talk about the worst rate of the expansion. Let's talk about the worst rate of the expansion.
We already did Uldir.
Oh, okay. No, I mean Crucible.
We haven't talked about Nyaloth yet.
So, I think you two both did heroic Crucible of Storms, yeah?
I have never stepped inside.
I've never
really?
seen Restless Cabal. I got AOTC with Unat, but the group, I got pulled in by a friend of mine to do Unat, and they'd already killed Restless Cabal. So I've killed Unat once, and I've never touched Restless Cabal.
So,
I watched the guild that shall not be named race world first.
So when I was doing it, we only got, I think we did 10 polls on Utnat on Mythic, and we just said, no, fuck it, we're not doing this garbage. But the problems that I had up front with this is that 2 boss raid, it felt kind of, way too short. But the tuning on those 2 fights and the mechanics that were expected were ungodly high. And then the loot was also way too good to pass up. And again, I kind of mentioned it before, think about damage numbers, like in Mechatork, my favorite fight. That fight, you only did 20k. 20 to 25k, that was you're pumping really hard. And then Shamans could maybe do maybe 28k just because their kit was just way too good. But the fact that you would go from 20k, and when you get to Restless Cabal on an AoE fight, you were pulling 100k during the first part of the fight, and then it would slowly peter off. But people were ending the fight with 70,000, 65,000, and that was the numbers that you were shooting for if you were really pushing. It was a huge jump, and it was primarily because of the gear. But man, that fight, those fights were so toxic as far as their mechanics, because it was just so painful. To kind of break it down, there were 3 relics, and the whole fight was integral on, you know, the kind of gimmick of these different relics have different things, and they also affect the mini bosses in different ways. When one of the bosses picks up this relic, it's going to cast these abilities. You have to deal with those, and then the next time it casts them, they're empowered. The other abilities also get stronger when they go to the next ones. So you had to know 6 different like dances for every single time one of the 2 bosses picked up one of the 3 relics in the room. You also had player choice in deciding which boss got to which relic and when they did it, but it was a lot to absorb. The information was so stressful. Like the spear, everyone would be taking lightning, so it was a healer mechanic. But then you also had to stack. The orb, you know, everyone had to spread out, and then everyone had to break a priority add shield before it exploded. And then the last one was like everyone gets a healing debuff, so everyone has to get healed through it, but everyone has to stand away so they don't get chain lightning down. And it was just like those abilities were just randomly assorted depending on which boss picked up which relic. And there was a time where you had to have bosses pick up multiple relics, and so it's like you have to stay stacked, but you have to spread because of chain lightning. Everyone has a healing debuff, and you have to burn a priority ad to break its shield or you die. So it was like, holy shit, what is going on? And it was just, I remember having one of those moments on pull like, I think we were at pull like 230, and we died, and I was just like, what the hell is happening? Like, that's the first time we've been to this part of the fight, but I have now lost all cognitive presence of what is actually happening. And I've never had that in a raid fight before, except for Mother Maiden Vigilance, but we're not going to talk about that. Just having that weird moment of like, there is actually too much going on for me to pay attention to everything. It was that stressful. And then, again, the loot was just this unusual tier loot with extra affixes, and it was just, you had to go there. But the only way to really do the fights was everyone had to be an AoE dot class, because you had to kill ads, you had to kill both bosses at the same time, and there was a bunch of priority stuff that was going on. So it was like stack Shadow Priest, stack Demo Warlock, stack Elemental Shamans, just like it was just really, really toxic. And I haven't even gotten to Utnat yet. Like the other I would say the other raid boss of the instance, there was an ad that was just a trash ad between the 2 bosses, and it was a raid boss. It had like as much health as one of the bosses from before, and it was, you had to bring the relics with you and use their abilities to kill all of the trash ads. Like you had a spear, and you had to get these blobs down to 1% HP, and when they got to 1% HP, they went immune, and then they had a charge time, and if they finished their cast, they revived, but the spear could kill them. But it would also kill everyone else. So you had to choose to group up all the ads and when to use your spear, or whoever in the group had the spear, you had to use the spear. And then there was a bubble shield to save you from the ads, and then the orb one was just like a damage debuff, a raw damage debuff. But it was like, why does it feel like the trash is an actual raid encounter where you're fighting through this long-ass hallway, fighting a giant boss, killing all these ads, and you have to use the relics to like push your way through? Like, yeah, sure, it was cool and different, but so tuned poorly. Especially since just the power creep at that time was so bad. Mapes, do you have any input before I ramble about Utnat for like 2-3 minutes?
Oh, like I was saying, I never even saw...
Discord.
I never even saw Restless Cabal. I got brought in for Utnat, and I barely remember it. I remember thinking, this is a really cool boss chamber, and like there's some interesting mechanics going on, but I never really had time to learn the fight. So I'm glad that, you know, you had the experience and we get to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Then I'm going to make Utnat really short and sweet and to the point. Same relics.
You're adding a letter to his name, by the way.
Utnat, sorry.
There you go.
There we go.
Thank you.
We good? Cool.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Utnat. I only got like 10 pulls. Same. I only got like 10 pulls in that fight on Mythic, but because of the relic interaction, because of the ad presence, the fact that there were other affixes that were affecting where you could stand in the room, on top of, you know, the same shit like you can't be stacked because of chain lightning, everyone pulses, we have to kill priority ads to break shields, now the room is on fire and there's big ass laser beams going through, and if you get hit by the laser beam, you're literally dead. The boss is casting extra abilities, you have to stack in the bubble. Like, the problem was everything overlapped. So like there was a moment where it was like, I think it was like our 3rd pull, where it was like the raid lead was like, okay, pop the bubble, everyone stack. Oh shit, cast the spear. Okay, everyone spread for chain lightning. Everyone's like, what is happening? Like, what are we doing? Like, what do you mean? And like after the wipe, he was like explaining, so it was like, well, the abilities overlap. So in order to kill all the ads that we were getting low, we had to pop the spear. It was like, okay. But we all were taking damage. Oh yeah, so we had to then stack inside the bubble to mitigate the damage. Well, we can't because Udnat's about to cast Chain Lightning, and we were sitting there like, this just feels like an impossible puzzle to solve. Like, we literally just did not know what to do. We did it for, like, I think it was like an hour and a half, and then we just, like, there was an announcement like, yeah, we're not doing Udnat anymore. Just, show up and we'll do Battles of our Lore Mythic, and we'll just call raid for the Saturday. It was like, that fight was just, it was way too much to absorb. Then the reason why, the tuning was problematic, but they made a boss fight with just too much going on. And when you look at a fight like Mechatork, I was saying earlier, Mechatork had a lot going on, but it had nothing on these two fights. Like, it was like an extra, like, 4 or 5 abilities, and each ability you had to care for in a certain manner, otherwise multiple people just died.
Do you think if they had removed the relics and, focused a little less on the relics and more on people handling these mechanics instead of the relics handling the mechanics, do you think that would have made it more accessible, approachable?
They would have had to tune it back, because again, there were certain abilities that's like, when this ability happens, the idea is you pop this bubble, this relic, you pop the bubble, and everyone stacks inside of it. It's kind of like a spirit link. So if they tuned it back to make it realistic for healers or, DPS expectations, oh yeah, it would have made the fight much easier. But the fact that at certain points in the fight, it was like the raid lead calls out, Rise, go pick up the orb, and I have to go pick up the orb, and then I have to know when to use it, and that's the only time I can ever use that relic, and during the fight, every 20 people have to pick up each relic one time because the fight was a 9-minute long fight. It was like, just adding that extra element on top of the other 12 abilities that I had to memorize and know what to do and know where to stand and how to deal with, it was just really, really hard. Just having too many abilities and making them overlap, that's where it becomes the problem. I think every individual ability was fine. I think every individual ad and everything that they cast was fine. But when you got to a point and there were 3 ads that were all individually casting something, and each boss was casting a different ability, and then the solutions to them intertwined and overlapped on each other, that's where the problem arose. It was just too much information.
I just thought of something that maybe perhaps you didn't think of while you were like balls deep in Prague. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Have you just tried to like
get good?
Get good?
Yeah, we tried that for about 250 pulls and killed Restless Cabal, and then when we went to Udnat, we decided we also didn't have enough Shadow Priests.
So clearly you were not getting good at that point. Then you were still getting scrub.
So
yeah,
it sounds like a Mythic Kil'jaeden problem of too many overlapping nightmares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was information overload stepping into that raid and having 30 different abilities that you had to know, and also knowing that certain abilities would overlap and the solutions that you had to take for each ability were different. That's where it became hard. It's like, again, like having to spread inside of a bubble and casting another ability while everyone's taking damage, and then you have to move because there's a giant laser beam coming down, is just information overload. Every individual portion of the fight, totally okay with. The fact that everything overlapped made it a nightmare. I think that was the biggest problem with that entire raid, is they were like, well, let's just make these fights stupid hard and see how people handle it, and it was just not, you couldn't handle it.
So there's something that, you brought up. We went over notes before we started the podcast, and one thing that we brought up was talking about power creep between the raids. And this is one I know that Rise wanted to talk about. I didn't really experience it because I wasn't really raiding hard at this point, but this was the first real jump in power creep, you'd say, for the expansion.
Yeah, the trinkets and the items that came off of Crucible of Storms bosses were nuts. Like, it was like everyone wanted those because the affixes on them were just stupid good. It added like an extra 5k damage on Sims. The trinkets, the weapons, all had interesting effects to them that made them really good. But more specifically, when we transitioned from all of these really good items from Restless Cabal and Udnat, and then suddenly you went to Eternal Palace, and more specifically, essences came out. You were seeing Mechatork, how I mentioned before, kind of single target, gong kind of single target. You were looking like 35k was like the highest echelon that you could possibly push. And all of a sudden, that expectation, when you got to Eternal Palace, it was like, oh, you're not pulling 80k? Like, you're doing something wrong. Because it just brought so much more variance. In like a burst phase, obviously, not like an entire fight. It was more like
Right.
60k for, I think it was like Water Behemoth and the first chick. I can't even remember the first chick's name in Eternal Palace, and I have C in that tier.
Abyssal Commander.
Yeah, Abyssal Commander. But like there was such a large power jump because they were just like, let's throw in these new abilities that were really busted. Like really, really good. And not to the point where it was like one specifically broke the game. Depending on your class, obviously that is not true. But like they added so much potential to your class that it was just like, yeah, if you don't have these things, you're just never going to be good enough. And then the power jump was again like 30k to like 60k. And like ad fights were like 80 to 100k depending on your class and your essence choices. So like the power jump in there was colossal going to Eternal Palace, which I think is kind of problematic actually. Like having a mid expansion jump that's that significant, then it feels like whatever content you were doing before is now irrelevant.
Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
I can see how that might be problematic.
Yeah. But since we spent way too much time, and I rambled way too long about that dumb 2-boss raid that never should have existed.
Well, we've
let's
only got about 15 minutes left before we do need to start wrapping things up. So, what do you guys think? Should we just, go over what we've gone over so far? Clearly, we're not making it to Ny'alotha tonight, or if we do, we're just making it 2. We aren't going to talk about it. So do you guys just want to go over what we've gone over? Do you want to hit Eternal Palace really quickly?
I'm easy with Eternal Palace. I never ran it.
Well,
job,
you did
Jay.
one heroic, right?
I did one heroic on my rogue.
I mean, I feel like I could get through Eternal Palace kind of quickly, but then that leaves off
Yeah. We'll hit Ny'alotha next week.
Sure. We can start the next episode off of that. Alright, so Eternal Palace. Abyssal Commander, really kind of disappointing first fight. Like, the whole fight was just, oh, you have a stack of a color. At some point, you need to get hit by an ability of the other color, and you'll pulse damage the whole raid, and then you'll switch colors. And if you're one color, you have to do something, and if you're the other color, you have to do something else to, like, not get, like, your stacks to, like, blow up on you. Like, okay.
Red light, green light.
There's really nothing else going on. It was just like, okay, if you're blue, go ahead and get hit by a green ability and switch to blue. And if you're green, okay, now get hit by an ice ability, get switched to blue or whatever. It's just like, I know that I was just saying the same colors there the whole time, but like, yeah,
I'd say
really boring fight.
It was the most basic fight of the expansion.
Probably one of, yeah.
Like compared to the other entrance boxes, like Talik had 3 phases to it. It had something going with it. You got on an elevator. You rode an elevator down. Talik had something. It was just green or blue, baby. Let's do this.
Green or blue all day. As a quick side note, because we had kind of brought it up for the other raids, I was really disappointed with the aesthetic of Eternal Palace, because like the whole Eternal Palace like being spoiled for years of like, oh, you're going to be able to go see Ashar's realm, and it's going to be crazy. It's this big kingdom. And, like, the ride to get there, it's like you jump into a pool of water,
and you get
sucked through this toilet bowl, and then, like, off in the distance, there's this small little building, and you're like, this is it? I remember going up to Nighthold and being like, wow, there's a big-ass castle on an island, and I get to fight all the way through it and kill everyone inside? That's cool. Instead, I'm, like, looking at this, like, oh, it's just a little spire.
He's just a little guy.
Yeah, it's just a little tiny thing. Kind of disappointing. Which I think is kind of the overall theme that I actually share with this raid.
So Blackwater Behemoth, we get our first
fuck
3D
underwater
fight.
fights. No, fuck that. Never bring back underwater or air fights. I feel like we learned that with Alec here. Come on. Keep it on the ground.
The fact that on Mythic you had to be very careful because the whole Mythic mechanic is if you stack, you basically just die to ticking damage. That made it so much harder because it wasn't just, oh, I can put up a range marker and have 5-yard spread. It was, I have to be looking 365 degrees around me and spread, but there were also abilities where we had to stack, or you had to stack somewhat. So it was cluster. It wasn't fun. The intermission between them where you had to pass all the jellyfishes, that was kind of dumb.
It was totally lame. Like, alright, I guess I'll just take 20 seconds out of my life to swim.
Also, a lot of abilities didn't work. You couldn't Windrush Totem in there because it would be on the ground, and unless you were walking, you couldn't interact with it. Spirit Link Totem didn't work in there. Barrier didn't work in there.
Oof.
Like, there were a lot of classes just like, oh yeah, I don't get to use this ability. That sucks. Kind of dumb. Really, not kind of dumb, really dumb.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Blackwater Behemoth letdown.
Yeah, big letdown. Radiance, though. The only part that I have a problem with Radiance is the fact that it was literally recycled from a Legion dungeon boss. I have Ashara. It's the exact same mob. It's the exact same mob, and the abilities are the exact same. Function a little bit different, but it's the exact same abilities. Just instead of in Eye of Ashara, the dungeon in Legion, when you were fighting it, it started at 25% HP, and this one is at 100% HP, and they turned into a raid boss. Just no, I not a fan. Like it didn't feel new. It didn't feel exciting. It didn't give me that, oh, this is a cool new fight, I get to learn it. It was literally, I walked in there, saw the mob, and was like, I've seen this mob. And I opened up the dungeon journal and was like, this is a dungeon mob. This is a dungeon boss. And I looked at the abilities and was like, these are the same abilities. They just hit 2 people instead of 1 now.
And there's tornadoes. I guess the tornadoes were in the original fight too. Yeah, I never really considered that. Yeah, it was just scooped up out of Eye of Ajara.
Yeah, it was like, obviously it was, instead of the ability targeting 1 person, now it targeted 2. It hit a little bit harder, and there was like a cool little intermission. It was the same fight. It felt like I was getting recycled, repurposed garbage.
Shame.
Hot take.
In
Shame.
In an interesting arena, at least.
Yeah. I mean, the arena was cool. Giant underwater cave, big ritual going on. Someone sacrifices her life to summon this big elemental. Sure. But the fight, it wasn't new. It wasn't exciting. I think we killed it in like 7 pulls on Mythic. It's like, we've literally done this boss before.
Yeah. As opposed
really,
to
really weird.
The next boss, Lady Ashvane.
Oh no. Interesting thing about Lady Ashvane.
That did not sound like a bad O.
The interesting thing with Lady Ashvane is similar to some other bosses that we've mentioned tonight. It did have a choose your own how you want to do it style. Like the style that we chose, normally you'd want to 3-tank it, but we decided to just have a Ret Paladin, or not a Ret Paladin, a Holy Paladin that would tank like the little orbs, because in this fight there were little orbs that would travel from the core of the boss. But on Mythic, they never dropped stacks. You couldn't drop them. So when you had stacks, you had it forever. So we just had a Holy Paladin, like, take 15 of them, bubble himself, and then he would, take, like, 6 more before he died, and then he would die. And then at a critical time, we would res him, and then he would just bubble again, and he would take 5 more, 6 more, however many he could get in the bubble steed charge, and then he would die, and we were basically cheesing the mechanic. But, a similar problem, I think, to Fetid Devourer is that boss was just way overtuned. The whole mechanic of breaking a shield, every time you break the shield, it gets bigger, and then as the fight progresses, she gets stronger based on her missing health, and the abilities permanently, infinitely stack, so it's a hard enrage timer. Like, or not hard enrage, soft enrage. Just like, the fight was fun to do it, and it was chaotic, and all the little mechanics nuanced together was fun, but like, when I killed that boss, I said I never wanted to go back.
I kind of liked it. From a range DPS perspective. Like, I like the idea of, whenever people are called out that they're about to get bubbled, then they stack up so you can AoE them down and break their bubbles. And then you also had to have some coordination whenever you'd get paired up with people. Like, the red people would have to stand apart to break as many coral as you can.
Mm-hmm. And then again, the coral shooting the bubbles, so everyone has to individually take stacks. And you can't break multiple bubbles at a time because then it splashes the whole raid with AoE. Yeah.
So I like the coordination aspect of it. I
will agree. The coordination made it fun and it made it challenging, but a little bit of overtuned and just a little bit of it being really stressful at certain times of like everyone had to be perfect, no one could take an extra stack. If you didn't break one more coral, it was a wipe. All that stuff just playing into it, it made the fight like exhausting.
All right, next up, Orgazoa the jellyfish.
Orgazoa. Funny thing about Orgazoa, this fight had a really hard DPS check in it, but it was more so a healer and tank fight. Because I don't know why they decided to reverse the tank mechanic for Orgazoa, which I guess might have been cool for tanks, but when you get hit, the first hit sucks, and then it progressively gets worse and worse. Or like it gets less and less, I mean.
Right.
Kind of a interesting change. So you had to use your big cooldown on the first hit, and then it just got less. But man, that healing check was atrocious.
And then
the little dance though, in the shower, like the shower dance, that was fun, and the ramp was kind of fun to some extent. But
I think you should have been able to cheese it. It was weird that you couldn't. Like,
well, you know, some classes were able to cheese it, and then like other classes just never found success. Like, I don't know, it felt like you could, but there was no consistent. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Could demon hunters just glide down?
They could, but again, it was randomly they would just get clipped by one of the floating jellyfish. And so it was like, if you were a really solid demon hunter and you got a little lucky, yeah, you could. But you didn't want to, because when you got to the bottom, then you would start taking the ticking damage. So you like kind of needed to stay with the group. So yeah, it was a lot going on. I don't think it was a bad fight, but it like in comparison to like other fights, when I think of like really fun fights like Opulence, Mechatork, kind of in a sense, Stormwall Blockade, or like
even like, Conclave.
Yeah, even Conclave. Like this fight, like is kind of in that like mid-tier range. Like there's a lot going on, and we could talk about it for 10 minutes, but like it was really nothing special. It was just a huge tank check, huge healer check, and then like a couple ads that just like did some stuff at the very end.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say is phase 3, which was interrupt. What was a stack for one of the mechanics, interrupt the other, and nuke the boss. There wasn't much to phase 3.
Yes, stack in the big circle, and then the other Naga girl, you interrupt her. Just you fight the boss, you just lust and you burn the boss, and the healer check is still really high, but like, yeah, there's nothing super special. Like it was fun, but nothing crazy.
I will say, moving on, Orgazoa was a better fight than the next one, Queen's Court.
Oh, 100%.
I think, first of all, I think the biggest problem with Queen's Court is the boss had too much health. The fight went on unnecessarily long.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how long Queen's Court went, but I'm pretty sure on Mythic it was like a 7-minute, which was really for like all the mechanics going on with that boss. Right. The hardest thing with that boss on Mythic was the decrees, and like every individual decree isn't hard, but when there's a decree that goes out where 5 people have to stack and 6 people have to spread, and then during that time there's pulsing lightning, so everyone has to like kind of be near each other to get healed. Like again, it felt like kind of the Crucible of Storm situation where it's just like there's really janky overlap here, and it just does not feel good.
Yeah, and I mean, really, I already said my biggest problem with it was the unnecessary health bloat of the bosses is crazy. Yeah. Like, even whenever we went and did the achievement run, it still takes a while to kill that boss.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's also true for the next boss. But I guess last thing about Queen's Court is just like every ability was fine, but you can't have it be like, oh, you're at a part of the room, so one ability is disabled, but then the other 3 just like there's so much going on. So like you have to fundamentally understand. You know, you can say like, oh, you need to understand phases of a fight, but like each phase gets 100% dynamically different. So while you're learning it, you also have to keep in mind like the dynamic differences in each phase, and like on top of what the bosses are casting. It felt very similar to Crucible of Storms, that Queen's Court fight. It was not a great time in my opinion.
Now on to Zacky boy. Zakul.
Zakul is a pad fight. I don't know if you guys knew that, but man, the DPS skewing for Zakul, like Legion numbers, it looked like corruption numbers.
Pre-corruption, corruption numbers.
Yeah, so like it was weird because each phase was completely different. Like the phases were not the same at all. Like one phase was an ad phase. One phase, you're trying to dodge stuff in the room. Another phase, you're trying to kill priority ads before they like metamorph into something bigger. And then there's another realm. When you're in the other realm, like you get like a 50% damage increase that like slowly stacks up, and then you can kill other players. Like that was kind of toxic. Like if you accidentally like tab targeted, missed an ad, and you accidentally like
Ignite.
killed one of your teammates. Yeah.
Ignite just
Or
spreads.
yeah, fire mages ignite. Shadow priest would like dot their friends to like pad really hard. And by the
God.
way, to put in perspective, like on the previous fight, Queen's Court, 2-target fight, Shadow Priests were still pulling like 85k at the highest possible echelon. But on Zakul, like I'm pretty sure the highest Shadow Priest was like almost 200k. So it was like people were padding, man. Like you could pump out a lot of damage because people would just like use their friends as a shield battery or an amp battery, whatever you say for Shadow Priest. They would you just kill your teammates, but you'd kill the boss like super quick because of it. All the abilities again kind of had that feeling of like the very end of the fight there was too much going on, and also a little bit overtuned where you had to break a huge shield while maintaining 2 different realms and killing multiple ads and interrupting stuff, and positioning became chaotic. Like it was a lot to handle. But Zakul is. I didn't do much progression on Zakul because I got in like the last like I think it was like 30 pulls before we killed it because I had to take a break from the game for a little bit. But that fight was the first like 2 days of progression were really really stressful. Like trying to figure out who's most optimal for the damage phases, who can kill the ads, who can control them best, what healing cooldowns they use. A lot of stuff to figure out. It was really difficult. Kind of reminds me of like Carapace.
Yeah. And don't get slapped by tentacles that can appear from the side of the walls and slap the entire raid.
Yep.
Alright.
Oh, Queen Ashara.
This is one that I've done this fight a few times on Heroic, and I still don't know what the fuck's happening.
I have a boss kill of this boss on Mythic. I don't even remember what fully happened. And the sad part is that it's like a 10-minute. So, if you're having problems in phase 1, which is essentially really easy, but phase 1 goes for like a minute, and then there's phases 2 through I think 6 is what we had it outlined as. Like it was literally a 6-phase fight. And each phase was dynamically different. Hardest part of that entire fight, which goes back to the Queen's Court thing, is the decrees. Like, if the decrees weren't there, the fight still would have been really hard, but the decrees made it unnecessarily hard. Where on Mythic you had 2 decrees at a time, and one of them would be like, stack with 5 people, but never stop moving. So it was like, you had to find 5 other people that also had, you have to stack, but don't stop moving. While there were laser beams going out, while there were ads, while you had to still maintain damage, while you couldn't go to certain parts of the room because they were blocked off, while you had to be dealing with standing on plates to charge them, while Ashara was doing LOS attacks. It was just another one of those scenarios where it's like, the decrees just made that fight so stupidly hard, and it's just the stacking of mechanics. When you have so many mechanics that go off at the same time, but you can't ignore them, otherwise they just kill you. Like that, it's really, really demoralizing to go into a 10-minute fight, die in progression in minute 2 because Johnny decided he wasn't going to do the 5-man stack. Like, it was such a bad feeling. Yeah.
Couldn't you say that, though, for, like, any fight, though? Like, I don't think that's purely a unique to that fight thing, because Johnny can fuck up your raid regardless on any fight by not doing the plan.
Well, the thing here is
true.
the coordination required. Like, you have to like, you don't know who's going to be who's going to be a part of the group that you have to stack up for.
Yeah.
Right.
And to put in perspective, there were 6 different decrees, and each player randomly got assigned with 2. So, 15 people in the raid group can have don't stack, but then there are 5 people that have stack with 5 or more people. So if you guys ever did Mythic Star Augur, where everyone had the different buffs, it was kind of like that instant chaos moment of like, oh shit, I have to find my other people, or I have to get away from people, or I have to realize, oh, do I have to move or do I have to stand still?
But
Do I have to isolate? Do I have to stack? Do I have to stand in the little pool that only I can soak? And if I'm standing in the pool, do I have to have someone nearby to like meet that 5-mana requirement? It was just a shit show. And most guilds that were getting good progress, it was because, oh, this decree, we got lucky.
Yeah.
Oh, this decree, we got lucky. Oh, bad decree, 3 people died. Okay, wipe. That's how it felt. And again, that was a 10-minute fight of, we're 6 minutes in, and this decree just felt impossible, and we just couldn't handle it, and we died.
And
maybe the answer is get good, but...
And it's, you're dealing with the decrees while doing the fight. Like, it's just like, all right, well, the fight's hard enough. Let's just toss a couple decrees at him while we're at it.
Just that unnecessary addition of difficulty, I felt. Which I guess was kind of a theme for these last 2 raids.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's the summary of Eternal Palace. And, man, I gotta tell you, assuming that we don't count Crucible Storms, because, fuck that raid, Eternal Palace was, in multiple facets, a step down for me. Like, essences and the huge power creep, the unnecessarily high power creep sucked. The fact that some bosses just felt impossible with how many mechanics were totally going on, instead of having a couple mechanics that were difficult to deal with. Just the overlap made it feel impossible for Orgzoa, Queen's Court, Zakul, Ashara, even the Crucible Storm bosses. Just like, this was a huge step down from what they had been doing with Battle of the Tsar lore.
I still think Ajara was a great fight because of just like that. Again, for me, if you want to make a great fight, then put a lot of coordination in it, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I felt like Ashara and some of the other fights, it was unmanageable to some degree. Like, unless you were everyone was galaxy brain, 200 IQ, like, there were just some times where you looked at the situations like, I literally don't know what to do. This feels impossible.
If I move, I die. If I don't move, I die.
If I soak the thing, I live, but I need to have 5 people soak with me, so I need to communicate that. But the 5 people that have to soak with me all need to move as well.
So they're just gonna spin around in circles around you.
Yeah.
And none of them need to
weird stuff.
None of them can soak.
Yeah, exactly. So we can next time we can talk about the Nyalotha and the extra power. But what's our question for chat today, Meeps?
Well, you've already answered it. So
okay.
And Jay hasn't really had a chance to speak the entire night, which has been tickling me pink. I love Jay getting a taste of his own medicine. Just
I'm okay with it. I'm just a pretty face that shows up. Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Rise, you've already answered this, but Jay, what has been, and you can say Nyalotha fight, and we'll get to Nyalotha next week though. Favorite raid fight of this whole expansion?
See, when we talked in the pre-show, I didn't know that this specifically was the question you were going to end with. You said that you're going to end with one of these questions, but I didn't know which one. So
I thought I specified this one.
You might have, and I might have just been really dumb, because that happens. But, you know what? I'm going to give you a cop-out. I'm going to give you a cop-out 2-part answer. All right? Because I can't decide between these two, and this is also partially a hot take. Skitra and Zanesh. For 2 completely different reasons. Mechanically, I love the new mechanic that they introduced with Skitra. The fact that only half the people can see mechanics, and then the other half can only see, can only interact with this ad, I thought was super cool. I think the ad should have been way more deadly. The fact that, the way that we do it on Mythic, you can put the ad, literally 5 feet away from the melee, and they don't get one shot is a missed opportunity, for my opinion. The drop-off damage should have been lethal up to 15 yards, and then whatever. Because that way, if the melee can see it, they'd be like, all right, go kill it, and then they'd see the cast bar, and just as it's about to finish, they'd have to run over, kill the boss for 5 seconds, and then go back and finish it off. I think that would be pretty cool. Anyway, obviously they should have made it break weak auras a lot sooner. But whatever. I really like that aspect of the team coming together for this crazy fucking mechanic that we've never seen before, and that I will applaud Blizzard 100 times over, because we've seen every mechanic. Now it's just them taking this mechanic and this mechanic and this mechanic and this mechanic, and now you got a boss fight.
Or just
So the fact
scooping
that they
up
made
a dungeon fight and putting it to a raid.
taking a dungeon boss and being like, crank the health to maximum, and there's your boss. Not
Yeah,
very
for real.
cool. But for what they did with Skitra, mechanically, phenomenal fight. It was fucking boring, though, aside from that one aspect. So that's why it's not my number one. It is tied with Zanesh, and Zanesh is the complete opposite of that. Really, really, really fun fight to play with a mechanic that feels fucking terrible. I love instant kill mechanics as long as you can see it coming, and as long as, whatever. The whole ball kicking thing, totally cool. If it hits a wall, everybody dies. I'm okay with that. But it feels really fucking terrible to have that happen when everything else about the boss fight was so fun. Like making sure the ball doesn't hit you, because then it's going to spawn an ad, and you've got to kill that ad. And if you don't interrupt it, everybody's going to get feared, and that's going to fuck up the ball thing. And the fact that it's not a DPS requirement, but faster DPS you get done, the less groups you have to deal with that potentially fucking it up. It was always, to me, a really fun fight, except for the ball kick. But I like that aspect. I don't know what they could have done to change it to make it not feel so terrible. Maybe it's just my experience of our guild handled it terribly. Well, I mean, we did the strat, but we all suck at it, so who knows. If I could, I'd probably make the two of them together into some weird, crazy, mythic only, literally Blizzard invites 10 guilds in the world to do this thing for a stream thing that would be really cool, where you literally have a 20-man Zanesh fight, but only 10 people can see the mechanics at any given time. I think that would be hilariously fun to watch as, BlizzCon, take Limit and have them play against each other. I don't know if you want me to say
Just
that
say Pieces, then.
Okay, fine. Limit and Pieces, and you have them on the BlizzCon stage be like, guys, we're going to try something cool. And then they fight Skitra, and then you're like, all right, cool. Next, then they spawn Zanesh, and they're like, now let's do it together, and have both guilds look up at Ian and be like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? And then, boom, do it right there, live. I think that would be super fun. Obviously can't happen in retail, because that would be the death of the game. But anyway, Zanesh and Skitra, 50-50. I can't choose between the two.
I've got kind of a cop-out answer, too. I think if Mother would have been tuned up higher so that you actually had to do it correctly, it would be my favorite fight. And then the fact that, you overgeared eventually, and then you could do the speed strat. Hands down, that would have been my favorite fight. However, since it wasn't like that, and you could do the speed strat pretty early on, Carapace has got to be my favorite fight.
Really?
Yeah.
You felt really salty when we were actually fighting it. I can't believe you picked it as your favorite.
I'd also completely progressed on it.
True.
This is whenever I was going with you guys, I'd already done my 80 attempts on it. I'd already killed it several times.
Yeah.
So
fair enough.
But doing the fight, yeah. I like how the phases are completely different. They're completely separated. The last phase takes coordination and also a bit of luck, or just being able to click a lock gate.
That's a valuable skill.
Yeah.
We found out
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very underrated skill.
Right?
Sorry, Brian. Love you.
And as a side note / cop-out answer, Mechatork 100% hands down is my favorite. However, my runner-up would be Ashara if there were no decrees. If I didn't have that weird fucking overlap that literally sometimes you just die, sometimes it feels literally impossible. If those little mechanics coming out every 2 minutes weren't there, that fight would have been amazing. But
Okay, so next BlizzCon, after whichever guild kills my
No.
Frankenstein, they're gonna have to fight Mechatork with decrees.
Oh god.
Stop!
But the decrees are the whole fight, not just the last phase.
Oh no. Blizzard, please no,
All right,
don't do
Blizzard,
this.
hire me. Like, I'm ready, bros. Put me in.
But yeah, if anyone in the chat has their favorite raid fight, throw it over. We'll feature you next time, or throw it in the YouTube comments. Speaking of which,
Heck yeah.
We'd love to hear from people in the YouTube comments. You can just answer what's your favorite raid fight for this expansion, and bonus why exactly is it your favorite, and that's it for us. You can find us live on Friday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific on Twitch at twitch.tv/dsmeeps. If you want to watch later, you can find the podcast on YouTube every week on the Simply WoW podcast channel. And for audio only, you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. Just search for the Simply WoW podcast. And that's all for us tonight. Hope you all have a great night and keep it simple.
have a good one all.